There's a ship drifting somewhere in the ocean without a crew. The last time someone saw it was over 50 years ago. Its story reminds of that of the Flying Dutchman, a ship that's bound to sail forever and bring disaster to whoever sees it at sea. At least the legend says so. Unlike the Flying Dutchman, the SS Bayimo was definitely real and built for a German company in Hamburg and began as an ordinary cargo ship. It was trading supplies between Hamburg and Sweden in the Baltic Sea starting from 1914. It had a strong steam engine and a hull made of steel. A few years later, it became British property. Then, in the 1920s, a Canadian company purchased it for around $18,000, a huge amount of money back then. The new owner, the Hudson's Bay Company, was actively using the ship for several years. They would often send it on voyages from its home port in Scotland to Siberia, Alaska, the Yukon, and the Northwest Territories. It also passed through the Panama Canal and even the Suez Canal, with fur pelts for sale on board. Sometimes it would also transport passengers. It had completed 9 successful voyages before this strip of good luck came to an end. Starting from the 1930s, SS Bayimo would have trouble with ice and storms. When it first got trapped in ice in October of 1931, some of the crew managed to escape to Alaska. 15 of 22 sailors decided to stay with their vessel and try to save it. They had furs and other valuable cargo worth around $58,000 aboard. The company sent them supplies to survive the winter. They set camp near the ship out of the hatches, tarpaulins, and other materials, and offloaded the cargo. At the end of November, a blizzard rushed through the area, and it seemed like it had taken the ship with it. The ice platform had survived, but the ship broke free. Some of the crew members were sure it had sunk. But soon after, they heard from one of the locals who had spotted their ship around 45 miles away from their camp. The crew moved on with their lives, and the ship started its journey as a runaway vessel. People would spot SS Bayimo once a year or so, all the way until 1965. It was mostly spotted off the coast of Alaska. A man going to Nome with his sled dog, along with prospectors, explorers, and treasure hunters, all claimed to have seen SS Bayimo. Someone tried to board it and take it to port, but ended up stranded on it for days because of horrible weather. Others got luckier and managed to take a whaleboat, some furniture, and other valuables from the vessel. Those who got close to the ship saw that it was damaged and missing the propeller. Still, it stayed afloat without a crew for at least 38 years and became the longest sailing ghost ship in history. In 2006, the Alaskan authorities started a project to solve the mystery of this ghost ship of the Arctic and finally find SS Bayimo, either still above or below the water. So far, the project has not been a success. SS Bayimo remains one of the estimated 4,000 ships that have disappeared off Alaskan shores. If the legend of the 17th century isn't lying, this ghost ship could be sailing somewhere along the Flying Dutchman. It belonged to the Dutch East India Company. Its captain managed to do the impossible for that time and sailed from Holland to Indonesia in only 3 months. They said he was flying over the sea, and some evil tongues explained that he had made a deal with evil forces to achieve that. Once the ship was sailing back home, its captain and crew disappeared without a trace. There are many versions of what happened to it. One of the first ones said it had tried to enter port at the Cape of Good Hope, got in a terrible storm, and sank as there was no captain to save it. Another legend says the captain had refused to obey the skies to let the ship sink during the storm. A scary life form then struck the boat and the crew, and it was condemned to forever wander without rest. Many sailors claim to have spotted the wandering Dutchman. The Duke of York, who was to become King of England, mentioned having seen it in Australian waters. Right after spotting the ship, the man who saw it first fell from the top of the mast and didn't survive. There were more encounters with this legendary ship up to the middle of the 20th century. Ships would nearly collide with it as the Flying Dutchman jumped out of the blue. Scientists have a more logical explanation for this mystery: Fata Morgana, not to be confused with Hakuna Matata. Now, when you're out at sea on a hot day and the air is all wavy, it feels like when you look at the road on a scorching summer day. That's because of something called atmospheric refraction. When light passes through different layers of air with different temperatures and densities, it bends and twists. Sometimes, under certain conditions, this bending of light can create really bizarre optical illusions over the ocean, like sightings of the Flying Dutchman. The Fata Morgana phenomenon can make distant objects appear distorted, stretched, or even lifted above the horizon. So you can see a ship far away, but because of the way the light is bending, it will look like it's floating above the water or even disappearing and reappearing. A Fata Morgana is most commonly seen in polar regions, especially over large sheets of ice that have a uniform low temperature. But you can see it anywhere, even in deserts and over lakes on hot days. The first stories about ghost ships go all the way back to ancient Greek and Roman mythology. One of the most famous ghost ships in history is the Mary Celeste. This brigantine was traveling from New York City to Genoa and was fully stocked with provisions, but missing a crew when it was discovered in the Atlantic Ocean in 1872. The crew's personal belongings were also there, completely undisturbed. The final entry in their log was made 10 days earlier. We still don't know what happened to its crew, and the ship has inspired many spooky stories and legends. The Lady Lovibond was another legendary schooner that is believed to have been wrecked off the coast of Kent in the middle of the 18th century. The story tells that the ship's captain, Simon Reed, had just got married and took his bride on board for a celebratory cruise, despite the superstition that it could bring bad luck. They were on their way to Portugal when the first mate, who is also in love with the captain's new wife, went mad because of jealousy, attacked another crew member, and then took over the wheel and steered the ship straight into the dreaded Goodwin Sands. No one aboard survived, and the schooner is said to reappear as a ghost vessel every 50 years. In present times, many vessels become abandoned and turned into ghost ships intentionally. There are thousands of them floating in U.S. rivers, lakes, channels, and coastal waters. Some people lose their boats in storms and other extreme weather. Others have to abandon their boats because maintaining them can cost 10% of the boat's price. Plus, docking a vessel can add up to several $1,000s every year. Most boats have been made of fiberglass, so an owner can't just recycle them as scrap metal. So, once they want to get rid of it, they often tie it to a dock and sneak away, or leave it floating far away from the shore, or just try to sink it. When ghost ships sink in shallow waters, they can cause damage to coral reefs, mangroves, marshlands, oyster habitats, and wetlands. Plus, they can collide with unsuspecting regular ships and cause real trouble. So, don't do that. Enough said.
Strange things occur in the cold waters of Antarctica. One of these things happened to a ship called Jenny. It was a small schooner whose history began in 1822. The boat and its crew set sail and disappeared a year later. For 18 years, the ship was considered sunk. People forgot about it, but in 1840, the vessel reminded the world of itself. That year, the whaling ship Hope sailed through the Drake Channel in Antarctica. The crew members noticed a ship among icebergs. It was the schooner Jenny. It was floating slowly in the dark, with no signs of life. The captain of the Hope, Mr. Brighton, gave the order to approach the mysterious vessel. They thought it was some creepy ghost ship, but as they came closer, they noticed crew members on the deck. The sailors of the Hope called out to them, but received no answer. This time, it became clear that something terrible had happened to the Jenny. When Brighton boarded, he realized that the Jenny crew members weren't missing. They were here. Frozen people stood like statues. Brighton went down to the lower deck and found the captain. He was sitting frozen at the table, holding a pen. Brighton looked at the logbook. The last record was made on May 4th, 1823. The captain wrote that he was the only living member of the crew. They spent 71 days without food. It seemed that the ship got lost in the sea, because its captain went off course or sailed into an iceberg, but no one knew for sure. After that, nobody ever saw the Jenny again. According to rumors, the crew of the Hope abandoned the frozen ship and left it to drift in the cold waters. According to other rumors, this whole story is fiction. The story of the Jenny was described in a German magazine in the middle of the 19th century. Still, there was no further evidence of the ship's existence. Already in our time, Cambridge University decided to explore the case of the Jenny. The researchers discovered that one of the crew members of the Hope, who didn't disclose his name, told someone the legend of the frozen ship. Someone shared the story with another guy, and it was published in a German magazine called Globus. And that's all. There was no other evidence. One of the most famous ghost ships was the Mary Celeste, and there's no doubt about its existence. The history of this vessel was documented in court. People wrote about it in newspapers, but the most exciting thing is that the ship continued to be used even after 10 people disappeared from its deck. The history of the Mary Celeste began in Canada in 1861. When it was first built, the ship was called the Amazon. It changed captains several times, and it also hit some rocks. The boat was sold, bought, then sold again, repaired, and sailed under the name Mary Celeste. In 1872, it had a new captain, Benjamin Briggs. He was a decent, brave man with a lot of experience in navigation. He had a beloved wife, a daughter, and a son. When he went on his last voyage, he took his wife and daughter with him, and his son stayed in America. In November of 1872, the Mary Celeste sailed from the port in New York with 10 people on board and disappeared. 8 days later, another ship, the Dei Gratia, also left New York and followed the same route. Dei Gratia's captain, David Morehouse, noticed the Mary Celeste and immediately realized something was wrong. The ship was moving too freely, as if no one was controlling it. The captain tried to contact the crew members, but no one answered him. Then, together with other sailors, he climbed aboard the Mary Celeste. The ship was in good condition. There was no damage. The hold was slightly filled with water, but it could be easily pumped out. Everything seemed fine, but one lifeboat was missing. The crew members' valuables were in their cabins. The cargo was in the hold. The supplies of water and food were untouched. Judging by the records in the logbook, the ship was caught in a storm, but it was not too strong. Other ships also sailed through this storm, but nothing bad happened to them. The last record was dated November 25th, and it claimed that everything was fine. The sails of the Mary Celeste were slightly damaged, but perhaps it happened after the crew had disappeared. The whole ship was in excellent condition, but what made the people leave it? Part of the crew of the Dei Gratia stayed on board the Mary Celeste to bring it to dry land. Everything went well. They delivered the ship to the closest port. Next, the captain of the Dei Gratia appeared before the court and told about what had happened. However, the prosecutor and the judge didn't want to believe in the story of the Mary Celeste. They were sure the captain got rid of the ship's crew to get money for its cargo. According to the maritime laws of that time, if you found a ghost ship with valuable cargo, then a substantial part of this cargo belonged to you. So, many people thought that David Morehouse decided to earn some money. This version seemed to be more valid than the one about the mysterious disappearance of 10 people. Fortunately, no one accused the captain of committing a crime. They thanked him for his service and gave him a monetary reward. However, his reputation was damaged, which greatly affected his career, as many believed he attacked the crew of the Mary Celeste. But even after this terrible case, trial, and investigation, the story was not over. The Mary Celeste was still an expensive and efficient vessel. It sailed several times, but then one captain crashed it into the reefs to get insurance. The court revealed this deception and accused the captain of intentional property damage. The story of the Mary Celeste became famous all over the world. People began to build their theories, realistic and not. Someone believed the ship had sailed through the Bermuda Triangle, but this version was quickly refuted, as the route of the Mary Celeste passed thousands of miles away from the Bermuda region. Did the Kraken or another giant monster attack the ship? Nope. Since the boat was found in almost perfect condition, there were no signs of a struggle. One of the most popular versions was that the crew of the Mary Celeste stole some valuable cargo and sailed to Spain on the rescue boat. However, those who knew Captain Benjamin Briggs said he was a good, honest man. Besides, he had a son in New York, and Briggs would never leave him. A more thorough investigation revealed that a series of accidental circumstances could have caused the disappearance of the ship's crew. Before its last voyage, the vessel delivered coal. Perhaps the pump intended for pumping water got clogged with coal after that, and when the ship got into a storm, the hold filled with water and the pump broke. The captain couldn't understand the amount of water because numerous barrels in the cargo hold blocked the view. Benjamin Briggs assumed it was dangerous to stay on the ship during a storm, so he evacuated with the passengers on a lifeboat. Perhaps they were close to land and decided to sail there, but the storm intensified and overturned the boat. Also, one record in the log journal said that the chronometer was faulty. It was a device that helped to determine your location at sea using longitude. Briggs got lost and didn't know which way to sail. The storm was strong, and he couldn't determine whether the ship would sink. Perhaps Briggs decided to leave the ship in a rescue boat when he saw the coast of the Azores. The uniqueness of this ghost ship case is that, unlike many others, you can investigate it yourself. There's a lot of information about the Mary Celeste on the internet. There are documentaries and research articles. Perhaps you'll be able to notice something that others haven't seen and solve the mystery of the disappearance of 10 people.
They say nothing is ever lost, and it's true. Let's discover ships frozen in time. The first one is truly fascinating. Here, the Antikythera shipwreck. It's a Greek trading ship from the 1st century BCE. It's located on the east side of the Greek island of Antikythera and at the merging point of the Aegean and Mediterranean seas. Around 2,000 years later, in 1900, a group of Greek sponge divers discovered the wreck. They were going to Tunisia, yet they were forced to find shelter from a storm on a nearby island. Since they couldn't go anywhere due to the storm, they decided to look for sponges until the weather got calmer. One of the divers discovered the shipwreck at depths of around 130 feet. Imagine someone going for a sponge hunt, but getting out to the surface with archaeological treasures. The captain of the sponge boat talked to the Greek officials about what they had found. The officials sent 2 ships to the wreckage. The salvage operation was successful, and discoveries are now in Greece's National Archaeological Museum in Athens. The findings included 3 life-sized marble horses, jewelry, coins, and hundreds of works of art, including a 7-foot-tall Colossus statue of Hercules. Among these treasures, Antikythera ephebe, a bronze statue of a young man, caught more attention. Because the ephebe doesn't comply with any familiar iconographic model, and there are no known copies of his type, he held a spherical object in his hand. Scholars have different theories of who that person could be, but they are not in a consensus yet. More than 70 years later, Jacques-Yves Cousteau and his team went to the area and recovered hundreds more artifacts and the remains of 4 people. Interestingly, they discovered a complex set of interlocking gears, capable of predicting the movement of the sun, moon, and several planets. The mechanism can also show the times of solar and lunar eclipses years into the future. Think of this Antikythera mechanism as an early computer calendar, to plan significant events like agricultural activities, religious rituals, and Olympic Games. These artifacts found in the Antikythera wreckage are some of the most important findings in modern archaeology. Just the Antikythera mechanism itself has changed our perception of the limits of ancient technology. The mechanism has a sophisticated design and was made over 1,000 years ago. After all these amazing discoveries, experts believe that the wreckage site has remained largely unexplored and is mostly because of its location and the landscape of the seafloor on which the ship rests. The wreck is too deep for scuba divers but too shallow to use something like a submersible. A survey made on the seafloor in 2012 showed evidence of a second wreck about 800 feet to the south. It's clear that this area has a lot to offer humanity. What would happen if those sponge hunters didn't go to the area? Scientists found a shipwreck in Antarctica at the bottom of the Weddell Sea 107 years after it sank. The name of the ship was Endurance, and it was the lost vessel of Antarctic explorer Sir Ernest Shackleton. Scientists who laid eyes on it decades later say it is among the greatest undiscovered shipwrecks ever. That is why they filmed the whole discovery. The video shows the remains of the Endurance and proves it is still in remarkable condition. It has been sitting in 10,000 feet of water for over a century, yet it looks like it sank very recently. So the story goes like this. The ship was crushed by ice and sank in 1915. Shackleton and his crewmates had to escape by themselves in small lifeboats. From then on, it was all about survival. Shackleton imagined to get his crew to safety. Then, the ship sank. Yes, this is a pretty impressive story. But why did scientists prize this ship? Firstly, Shackleton's Imperial Trans-Antarctic Expedition sailed to make the first land crossing of Antarctica. Yes, the crew was trapped in ice, but the intention was important. Secondly, it's about the challenge itself of finding the shipwreck. The Weddell Sea is almost always covered in thick sea ice. You know, the same ice that made the Endurance sink. Getting near the presumed sinking location is super hard, let alone being able to conduct research. Experts of the modern expedition team foresaw the time when the lowest extent of Antarctic sea ice would come using satellite images. They realized that the weather was in their favor to start an expedition. Dr. John Shears said that they have successfully completed the world's most difficult shipwreck search, fighting against constantly shifting sea ice, blizzards, and temperatures decreasing to negative 0.4 degrees Fahrenheit. Yeesh, I can't imagine the worst conditions in Antarctica if these conditions are in their favor. Lastly, look at this. It's timbers. They're very much intact. Plus, you can read the ship's name. It's still visible. Marine archaeologist Menson Bound says that this is the finest wooden shipwreck he has ever discovered. He has 50 years of career experience, so I believe the guy. So how come the wood is not rotten? Dr. Michelle Taylor, a deep-sea polar biologist, said that there has been little wood deterioration because the wood-munching animals are not in this forest-free region of Antarctica. Workers of a coal mine in East Serbia discovered 3 shipwrecks that had been there for at least 1,300 years. The largest shipwreck is an ancient Roman fleet. It's around 50 feet long with a flat bottom. It's estimated that the ship could carry a crew of 30 to 35 people. Looking at its hull, you can see the marks of repairs. Wow, this one had a lengthy career. You know, it gives us insight into more than 1,000 years ago. The 2 smaller vessels, on the other hand, match descriptions of boats used by Slavic groups to attack the Roman frontier. These 2 have been discovered under mud and clay in an ancient riverbed. Apparently, in those times, there was a Roman base in a place called Viminacium City. Interestingly, Viminacium was a provincial capital with an estimated 40,000 inhabitants in the 4th century CE. For comparison, it was even larger than Pompeii. The Kostelach coal mine is a center of hidden gems. Archaeologists had found evidence of ancient human and animal activity here before. For instance, in 2012, experts found bones of at least 5 woolly mammoths, which went extinct about 10,000 years ago. Canadian archaeologists found a ship 150 years after it went missing in the Canadian Arctic waters. This merchant ship is called HMS Investigator. It was purchased in 1848 to search for the explorer Sir John Franklin's ship that got lost in the Northwest Passage expedition. So, HMS Investigator left Britain in 1850 for this rescue operation. The expedition crew, captained by Robert McClure, sailed the Investigator into the water. He realized that he was in the final leg of the Northwest Passage, the sea route across North America. But before he could sail into the Beaufort Sea, the 122-ton ship itself got stuck in the thick ice. The crew spent the winter over the Prince of Wales Strait. The following summer, McClure tried again to sail to the end of the passage, but the ice blocked his way once more. Here, too, the crew was forced to leave the ship. He steered the crew into the Bay of Mercy. There, they were to remain until 1853 when the crew of the HMS Resolute rescued them. Imagine a crew of 60 people who had to spend 3 winters in the Arctic without even knowing if they would survive. Later on, the ship was found sitting upright in about 36 feet of water. It was in very good condition. Arctic water has prevented the outer deck of the vessel from deteriorating quickly. The outline of the ship and its timber can be clearly seen. Plus, archaeologists have uncovered artifacts on land left by the sailors. They had unloaded everything before abandoning the Investigator. 3 sailor graves and 1 British naval shipwreck had also been discovered in the area. I wonder what else they could find there.
Wow, it's the only place where 1 minute you're learning 17 natural ways how to get rid of houseflies, and the next, you're taking an epic journey straight into a black hole. More than 10 billion with a B views in total. That's 47 billion minutes watched, or more than 70,000 years. That's all the way back to the Ice Age. No, I wasn't around then. 40,000 videos, hundreds of topics, and most importantly you, a whole 44 million of you. Our viewers. We could populate an entire country if we wanted to. We'd like to continue helping you learn and giving you useful skill improvement tips. Got a thirst for knowledge? We've prepared 4 masterclasses on creating a 2D character animation from scratch, 10 hours of video lessons, practical tasks using professional software, and additional materials that you can use with your own projects. Get the full course now and create your own animated masterpiece.
These things can surprise you, they can scare you, they can also be very confusing to you. They're scattered all over the world, from the icy plains of Antarctica to the hot Nevada desert. But you don't have to leave your house to see these places. It's enough to open Google Earth or Google Maps and enter the coordinates to see many weird things captured by satellites. So, our first stop is in Antarctica. Here are the coordinates. At the moment, you can see almost nothing except a white snow cover. But some time ago, users discovered a strange ship in this place. It was lying there, turned on its side, covered with snow. What was it doing there, and where did it come from? The internet began to make up its own theories. It's part of a big rocket. It's a ship from outer space. It's a secret base. It got there from the Bermuda Triangle. The more time passed, the crazier the theories became. But the theory that turned out to be true was also the most unexpected. This ship was actually pareidolia. This term describes the human tendency to see patterns in randomness. Your brain sees familiar shapes in clouds or coffee grounds or rock patterns because of pareidolia. So this ship was most likely just a pile of snow or some kind of iceberg. In any case, you can't see it on maps now. Probably Google just didn't want people to inflate ridiculous rumors. Don't leave Antarctica yet, because our next mysterious place is nearby. Here are the coordinates. What does it look like? A giant door or a glass roof? It looks quite strange against the white blanket of snow. What's nearby? Japanese Showa Station. Are these 2 objects somehow related? Probably not. But what is it then? Someone online joked that it might be a door from a Boeing. Apparently, it'd have to be a huge Boeing. Someone said it was the entrance to a bunker or a secret base. Is it a portal to another dimension? Of course not. All these theories were discarded when scientists got involved. They said that this object was an ordinary iceberg that had run aground and got stuck. It's melting and reflecting the sunlight, which is why its surface looks so shiny. Nothing special. Let's move to another cold place. This is absolutely crazy. A huge broken face hidden in the snowy plains of Antarctica. Who is it? Some kind of villain? Or the head of a giant buried in the snow? It's obvious that it's just an unusual landscape, but it's still quite impressive. And by the way, this is another example of pareidolia. How do people even find such things? They're like, how about spending hours walking through Antarctica using Google Maps? Sounds like a great idea. Anyway, let's move to our next destination. Do you think this might be some kind of pattern for a scary ritual? Or is it a secret place for witches and warlocks? No, this is a scientific base called FACE, Free Air Carbon Dioxide Enrichment. They release carbon dioxide into the atmosphere and run experiments to study its effects. What for? To simulate climate conditions and see how desert plants and ecosystems react to high carbon dioxide levels. Scientists monitor plant growth, soil chemistry, and the overall health of the environment in these regions. The thing is, the temperature is rising all over the planet. It's possible that in the future, many territories where people live will turn into a desert, and greenery in the deserts will be essential for our survival. So, scientists are looking ahead to know how plants will act in such conditions. Here are the coordinates of a place in another desert. You'll have to climb up a bit to see the whole picture. Giant stone wheels are scattered across the vast territory of the Jordan Desert. They're ancient, and scientists still don't know their true purpose. They were first discovered by pilots in the 1920s. In total, more than 1,000 wheels have been spotted there. Obviously, this is not a natural anomaly, and there's no pareidolia factor. But what is it? Scientists believe that ancient people placed those wheels at specific angles to the sun to tell time by the shadows and track the passing of years. Others suggest that the wheels were something like animal traps, or they could be places for ancient rituals. Now let's move from the hot deserts to the water. Enter these coordinates and wait. Why is the water in this lake red? Don't rush to draw terrible conclusions. The reason for this color is algae. Certain types of algae and bacteria live in this salt lake. They multiply and give the water this color. Sounds convincing, but I doubt anyone would actually want to swim in that lake. Our next spot is located in Australia. You can see trees grow on a small island, but wait. It's not an island. It's a ship. A real ship that has grown dense thickets of bushes and trees. This is the SS Airfield, also called the Floating Fortress. In 1972, this ship was retired. People were supposed to dispose of it, but something went wrong, and they just left the vessel in the water near the shore. No one needed it except nature. Over time, mangrove trees began to grow on the rusting vessel. The unwanted ship has become a local landmark. Many tourists take pictures of it and post them online, so you can easily find its images from a more beautiful angle. If you pick this location and turn on Street View mode, you will see beautiful houses in the city of Nancy, France. There's a road on one side, but on the other side, everything is blurred. Why is that? What is Google hiding? Online, you can find the photos of this street. They're not blurred. And in one of them, in the window, you can see a tall figure with glowing eyes. Users called this figure Ghost on the Balcony. Quickly, it became a local landmark. The internet was discussing the supernatural appearance of this phantom. Someone suggested that this was a visitor from another planet. The most plausible version is that it's a statue that was distorted because of the camera angle. But if it's just a statue, why did Google block out this house? Why didn't they want us to see this figure? People have put forward many theories about this. What do you think? Share in the comments. There's one more blurred place. It's located in Tokyo. Turn on Street View and check out the street, passers-by, and a few people who are completely blurred. What did Google hide this time? Fortunately, there are pictures on the internet. A few people with the heads of pigeons stay here. They were called pigeon people. Obviously, these aren't heads, they're bird masks, and there's clearly nothing paranormal here. It was just a joke from art school students. Pigeons in Japanese folklore are considered the symbols of luck and adaptability, so the students decided to wear them. They hardly expected to get on Google Maps. Our next point. There's nothing weird and mysterious here. This is the ghost town of Rhyolite, Nevada, where gold was discovered in 1905. Many came to mine the precious metal. In just a few years, electricity was installed, buildings went up, and by 1910, the town was abandoned. The gold was gone, the streets were empty, and the buildings were abandoned. More than 100 years have passed and the city has turned into ruins. Tourists come here to feel this atmosphere of abandonment and look at the unique houses built from glass bottles. But you can walk through the streets of Rhyolite using Google Maps and Street View mode.
You're sailing on a calm ocean when you see it, a giant wave rising out of the water, towering over your boat. Uh-oh. But before you can react, the deck suddenly disappears beneath your feet, and you're falling into a deep and vast pit in the sea. Neither outcome gives you a chance to survive. Apparently, the ocean can both crash down on you and suddenly drop away beneath your feet. It's not your day. Well, in the first case, it will be a giant rogue wave. These waves are huge and dangerous ocean waves that appear suddenly and are at least twice as tall as the waves around them. These waves can rise up in the open ocean without warning and may move in a different direction than the wind and other waves. They're extremely dangerous even for big ships because they form super quickly and grow to be exceptionally large. But there's even a scarier threat in the ocean: rogue holes. Those are massive pits in the water, and until recently, no one could confirm their existence. They are the opposite of rogue waves. Instead of a huge wave rising up, they are deep dips in the ocean that appear suddenly, sometimes just before or after a big wave. The water drops sharply, often surrounded by normal-sized waves on either side. When the difference between the top of the waves and the bottom of the dip is much bigger than normal, it can be just as dangerous for ships as a giant 80 to 100-foot wave. Now, scientists have figured out that big waves and deep dips often happen together, so the danger they present now doubles. SS Max Wave Project was studying rogue waves when they found evidence of rogue holes. After that, researchers even recreated rogue holes in a large water tank to study them safely. And they found out that, apparently, rogue waves and rogue holes come from the same hidden pattern in the ocean. You see, the Max Wave Project didn't officially list rogue holes as a separate type of wave, but scientists did notice something unusual in their data. They saw deep drops in the ocean surface appearing together with very large wave peaks. This suggested that rogue holes might exist, but there was not enough evidence to confirm it. To test this idea, a team of researchers at Kyoto University recreated ocean-like waves in a long wave tank, about 50 feet long. It worked like a controlled mini-ocean where scientists could carefully adjust wave size and speed. Inside this tank, they were able to create both giant rogue waves and deep rogue holes. The rogue holes looked like sudden voids in the water, deep dips surrounded by normal-sized waves, like the ocean briefly sank down in one spot. It's similar to a sudden pothole appearing on the road, but filled with moving water instead of asphalt. So imagine normal waves as fast repeating bumps moving across the water. Now imagine a much slower, bigger wave on top of that. It looks like a rolling hill that lifts everything up and down. This bigger wave controls how strong the smaller waves are. If the hill hits a wave right when it's already at its highest point, the wave grows into a huge rogue wave, as if someone stacked one wave on top of another. But if that same hill pushes down when a wave is at its lowest point, it creates a deep hole in the water instead. It's like the ocean suddenly drops beneath your feet. So it's the same process, just timed differently. At times, it creates a giant wall of water, and at other times, it's a sudden dangerous drop. So the results of the experiment matched the mathematical predictions. They proved that those strange wave patterns were not just a theory, but something that can really happen in the ocean. In 2016, scientists compared mathematical models with real ocean measurements and found patterns that match both giant waves and deep holes in nature. Of course, in the real ocean, these shapes are not perfectly smooth like in experiments. The waves often have sharper, uneven edges, like a hill that is steeper on one side than the other. But even with these differences, they still followed the same hidden structure. This confirms that rogue waves and rogue holes are really two kinds of the same ocean event. They're just shaped differently by timing and energy. Meanwhile, we still really don't know the ocean. Most of it is a mystery to us. Less than 1/1000th of the seafloor has been seen up close. Imagine the size of Rhode Island or Luxembourg, hey, pick one. That tiny bit is what we have mapped. Everything else, deep trenches, cracks, caves, massive underwater mountains, remain blurry on our maps. Many phenomena went unexplained for centuries, too. For example, sailors kept reporting enormous waves that suddenly towered over everything else, sometimes more than twice the height of normal waves. Back then, most people thought these reports were exaggerations, like spotting mermaids or a giant squid. But those waves were real. Now, in 1826, Dumont d'Urville, a French naval officer and explorer, sailed the Indian Ocean on the ship Astrolabe. Yeah, it's a bad French accent. He saw waves of at least 80 to 100 feet tall during a violent storm that took the life of a crew member. At that time, scientists thought waves couldn't exceed about 30 feet. So, even though his account sounded unbelievable, D'Urville insisted on recording it. And guess what? Yup, instead of being praised, he was laughed at. Okay, I'll stop. Now, even earlier, in August 1498, during his third voyage to the Americas, Christopher Columbus and his crew heard an enormous roar from the sea and saw a wave rising behind their ships. It was as tall as the masts. The wave lifted the ships higher than anything they had ever experienced, and then dropped them into a massive trough. It was like a roller coaster made of water. Now, modern oceanography has confirmed that such colossal waves do exist. They're like skyscrapers suddenly appearing in the middle of a calm sea. A normal wave might be tall enough to reach the roof of a 2-story house, but a rogue wave can tower like a 10-story building. In 1861, such a wave apparently smashed a lighthouse in Ireland. It shattered lamps and sent debris tumbling down a lighthouse staircase. To do that, the water had to climb a 130-foot cliff and then an additional 85 feet of the lighthouse structure. It's almost as tall as a 20-story building. Rogue waves appear suddenly, often without warning, in the middle of the ocean. These waves form when winds, currents, and smaller waves line up just right, making a single giant wave much taller than the others around it. They aren't tsunamis and aren't caused by earthquakes or volcanoes. Physicists model this using something called the nonlinear Schrödinger equation, but basically, it just explains how the ocean can suddenly make a giant wall of water. On January 1, 1995, the Dropner wave struck an offshore gas platform in the North Sea off Norway. It measured 84 feet. This was the first time a rogue wave was officially recorded, proving those monster waves were real. But scientists still consider them rare. Well, by the year 2000, the European Space Agency's Max Wave project confirmed that rogue waves were more common than anyone thought. Using radar from SS satellites, scientists studied the global ocean and found many waves exceeding 82 feet. Some of the largest recorded waves even reached 98 feet near Newfoundland. Suddenly, what people used to brush off as sailor stories turned out to be terrifyingly real. On the 17th of November 2020, a weather buoy near Vancouver Island, Canada, recorded a very unusual wave in the Pacific Ocean. The wave reached about 58 feet, while the surrounding waves were only about 20 feet. This made it much larger than normal waves around it. On the 29th of November 2022, a rogue wave hit the cruise ship Viking Polaris near Antarctica. One person lost their life, several others were hurt, and the trip was canceled. On the 18th of September 2023, a large wave hit a beach restaurant in South Africa. 7 people were injured, and one person was swept out to sea but luckily rescued. And on the 20th of January 2024, powerful waves hit a U.S. military site in the Marshall Islands. Buildings were damaged, some areas were flooded, and waves moved far inland, showing how destructive these events can be.
The shipwreck of the MS Estonia is one of the most horrible maritime disasters in Europe. The wreckage of this giant ship still lies on the bottom of the Baltic Sea, but for a long time the authorities didn't allow anyone to approach it. Moreover, they even once planned to bury the vessel under thousands of tons of concrete. But why? It was just a passenger ferry. Perhaps someone really wanted to hide some secret connected with the ship. Let's try to figure it out. On September 27, 1994, MS Estonia departed from Tallinn for a routine trip to Stockholm. There were 803 passengers and 186 crew members on board. From the very beginning of the journey, the ferry encountered difficulties in the form of a powerful storm. However, high waves and strong winds weren't unusual for the Baltic Sea in autumn. And of course, the crew was prepared for that. But around 1 a.m., something went wrong. A loud metallic crash was heard. According to the later accident report, this noise was caused by a giant wave striking the ship. But there was something unusual about that wave. You'll learn about it a little later. So a loud crash rang out. Then around 1:15 a.m., the ship's bow visor lifted. Its doors burst open and water rushed into the vessel. The crew sent a distress signal, but the water was filling the ship too quickly. Around 1:50 a.m., Estonia sank. Out of all the passengers, 138 people survived. One of them later passed away in the hospital. News of the disaster shocked Europe. For Sweden and Estonia, it was one of the greatest catastrophes in the history of both countries, since most of the passengers on board were citizens of these nations. But what exactly happened there? Why did the ship sink so quickly? What was that huge wave? Of course, an investigation began. At first, it raised no questions, but later, something strange started to happen. Estonia, Sweden, and Finland organized the Joint Accident Investigation Commission, or JAIC. After a thorough investigation, the commission concluded that the bow visor's locking mechanism failed under the pressure of heavy seas, causing the visor to detach, tearing the bow ramp open and allowing massive amounts of water to flood the car deck. But why did this happen? The cause was said to be poor maintenance. However, survivors said that everything began with a loud crash. The locks couldn't have created such a sound, which means something else must have happened. Moreover, people didn't just hear some kind of explosion, they actually felt it. But for some reason, these witness statements weren't included in the report at all. Strange, right? But that was only the beginning. When a ferry is in port, its watertight bow visor opens so that passengers and vehicles can board. This section opened during the storm and allowed water to rush inside. However, the bow visor was later found about 1 mile away from the site of the shipwreck. 6 weeks after the disaster, it was lifted from the seabed and hidden at a base near Stockholm to conduct a thorough investigation. This piece of the ship remains there to this day. The Swedish authorities promised that they would raise the entire ship from the seabed, But then something happened, and they suddenly changed their minds. Then, in 1995, the governments of Sweden, Finland, Estonia, the United Kingdom, and several other countries banned any research into the wreckage altogether. As punishment, offenders could face 2 years in prison. They said it was for ethical reasons. According to them, the site is a maritime grave, and therefore no one should approach it out of respect for those who drowned. But the strange decision didn't end there. The authorities of Sweden, Finland, and Estonia even decided to seal the sunken ship in concrete so that no one could disturb the wreckage or allow grave robbers to reach it. Of course, the relatives of the passengers were outraged. They held meetings and demonstrations, protested against the decision, and it worked. The authorities abandoned the plan to seal the ship in concrete, but the ban on unauthorized approach is still in effect. Immediately after the strange investigation and the statements from officials, people began talking about conspiracy theories. Perhaps the ship had been transporting some kind of secret technology or sensitive information. Considering that this hypothetical technology was being carried on a passenger vessel, someone may have wanted to keep that transport secret. Another version claimed that some kind of underwater rocket struck the ship. It pierced the bow section and created the loud crash that survivors heard. But why would someone launch such a rocket? Perhaps because of the ship's secret cargo. Even if the vessel was carrying something classified, is there any evidence pointing to this version besides theories? Yes, there are a few. In 2000, a German journalist managed to reach the wreck site and took a sample from the hull of the sunken ship. He analyzed this piece and said the metal had been subjected to forces caused by an explosion. However, other specialists from a government laboratory later discovered that similar marks could be found on other ferries as well. They said this wasn't the consequence of an explosion, but the result of a special anti-corrosion treatment applied to the steel. It's difficult to say what to believe, but there was another detail. In 2004, 10 years after the tragedy, Swedish television interviewed a former customs officer who had worked at the port of Stockholm. He said that a few weeks before the disaster, 2 boxes had been transported through the port aboard MS Estonia. The customs officer wanted to learn more about the cargo, but his superiors ordered him to ignore it. That means the ship perhaps had already been transporting some kind of secret cargo even before the tragedy. The ban on researching the wreckage, witness statements that were not included in the investigation, the customs officer's interview, and the public outrage, all of these factors were too significant to simply ignore and forget about the disaster. Despite the authorities' ban on approaching the ship, one man decided to do exactly that. Swedish journalist and filmmaker Henrik Evertsson sent down a camera attached to a machine that can swim underwater and carefully examined the wreckage of MS Estonia. In 2020, he released a documentary film about it, and of course, the film revealed many things that the authorities had never talked about. The director's team used a remotely operated underwater vehicle that descended to the seabed and filmed the ship. They discovered a large hole on the starboard side of MS Estonia. The filmmakers stated that such damage couldn't have been caused by waves, by the detached bow, or by the seabed. If the ship had struck rocks, it might have been believable, but according to the director, the wreck site consisted of deep, soft clay. They concluded that such a hole in the hull could have been caused by an object the size of a small submarine that collided with the ferry at high speed. Of course, this film couldn't be ignored by the authorities. They admitted that a new investigation had to be conducted. During 2021 and 2022, the authorities of Estonia, Finland, and Sweden organized several dives to the wreck site. They used special cameras, 3D laser scanners, and other advanced equipment. Then, an interim report in 2023. They stated that there were no signs of a collision between the ship and another object, and no evidence of any explosion in the bow section. It was also reported that the vessel had been unseaworthy at the time of its final departure because of technical defects. Henrik Evertsson was arrested for illegally exploring the wreckage, but fortunately, he didn't receive a prison sentence. Instead, he was ordered to pay fines. In 2023, a television documentary about Evertsson's work was released. The film claimed that Henrik wanted to convince the audience that an unknown object had collided with the ship and used graphic materials that misled viewers. Perhaps he didn't do that. Perhaps the authorities were right. Or perhaps the conspiracy theories surrounding the ship are also true. To this day, no one knows exactly what happened to the MS Estonia on that ill-fated day. Nearly 140 years ago, some fishermen pulled pieces of a ship from Lake Michigan. But where was the rest of it? From that moment on, hunters spent years searching for the ghost ship. By the 1970s, the hunt reached a new level. One with a $1,000 reward offered to anyone who could find it. Still, nothing. It was as if the vessel had simply vanished into thin air. That is, until now. Researchers have finally found the shipwreck off the coast of Bailey's Harbor, Wisconsin. The ship called the F.J. King disappeared back in 1886. At that time, this 140-foot-long vessel had a very important job: transporting grain. Now you might think, grain? Really? That's it? Okay, sure, it's not like the ship was loaded with tons of gold or jewels. But we have to see the bigger picture. At that time, Wisconsin was known as America's breadbasket. The state produced huge amounts of food, especially wheat. In fact, about 1/6 of the nation's wheat was being harvested there. Farming was booming, and that of course meant big money. The F.J. King was part of that golden era.
For about 19 years, it successfully carried and traded grain and iron ore through the Welland Canal. That is, until September 15, 1886. That day, the crew were on their journey to carry iron ore from Michigan to Chicago. It was supposed to be just another routine trip, but they were caught in a powerful storm. The conditions were brutal, with waves nearly 10 feet high. The crew fought desperately to get the water out and keep the ship afloat, but the waves were too strong. They kept coming, one after another. The men worked hard until they couldn't go on anymore. The waves were splitting the ship's seams. At this point, a catastrophe was inevitable. So Captain William Griffin gave the order: abandon ship. They had no choice but to get out. The men grabbed their belongings as fast as they could and climbed into the ship's small yawl boat. It was 2 a.m. Everything around them was dark. As they tried to get closer to shore, the F.J. King went down, bow first. And then suddenly, boom! The crew watched in shock as the ship's stern deckhouse blew off, sending the captain's papers 50 feet into the air. They stayed in the small boat until they were picked up by a passing schooner called La Petite. The crew took them to Bailey's Harbor, and moments later, Captain Griffin filed a wreck report. That's when the real mystery began. In his report, the captain said the ship had gone down about 5 miles off the shore of Lake Michigan. But that was just what he thought. I mean, it wasn't based on any instruments, readings, or anything like that. It was just what he remembered from that night. A week later, though, a local lighthouse keeper spotted the masts of a schooner sticking out of the water, much closer to shore. He reported it to a nearby newspaper, and that's when people really started asking questions. Could that be the F.J. King? Even though they had a solid lead, it didn't take them anywhere. No one could find the boat. Days passed, then months, then years, until 2025. That's when an investigator named Brendan Baylod decided enough was enough. He gathered a team of about 20 scientists and historians to finally track down this historic shipwreck. They dug through hundreds of original documents about the ship and the day it went down, piecing together clues and narrowing down the area where it might be. Many experts were like, "Man, just let it go." And to be fair, they had every reason to feel discouraged. After all, that whole area had already been searched over and over. There was just no way the ship could still be out there. But Bayod didn't give up. Okay, truth is, he also thought it was a long shot. But working to find the ghost ship had other perks. His team wanted to get some hands-on experience with a brand new super advanced sonar. With that in mind, they set out on their mission, heading to Lake Michigan on June 28th. Okay, great. But where do you even start? First, Bayod had to clear something up. Back when the wreck happened, who was actually telling the truth about the ship's location? The captain or the lighthouse keeper? Getting that answer would point them in the right direction. Then, Bayod thought about something that might have already crossed your mind. How could the captain really know where they were? It was pitch black. He'd just been struggling to keep his ship afloat. He couldn't see much. He was exhausted and probably hungry. He definitely wasn't thinking straight. That's when the investigator realized the lighthouse keeper's directions were probably more accurate. Thankfully, he found the newspaper article from 1886. You know, the one I mentioned earlier, where the lighthouse keeper gave a more specific detail about where he'd last seen the ship's masts. What the investigator did next was draw a 2-square-mile grid around that location, and the team decided to map the lake bottom inside that grid using their fancy tech. So, there they were, aboard the Shoreline, a tour boat that usually carries sightseers along the peninsula. But that day, they didn't really expect to find anything. Their only goal that afternoon was to test their new side-scan sonar, one with much greater capability than the previous model the crew had been using. But then, after about 2 hours of searching, something strange happened. The sonar was sending out sound waves to map the dark floor of Lake Michigan when it started to act a little differently. And as the images began to stitch together, they revealed a shape that was impossible to mistake. A ship. Bingo. They'd found it. Turns out the wreck was less than half a mile from where the lighthouse keeper had said it would be. At this point, some of the crew had to pinch each other. They couldn't believe their eyes. They were shocked, not only because they'd found the ship so quickly, but also because of how well it was preserved. You see, the investigators were hopeful, but they also thought the ship would be shattered into pieces. After all, it had been carrying iron ore, and the weight of all that metal could have torn it apart even more. But no. To everyone's surprise, the hull was almost completely intact. Sure, the front right side was crushed, but the rest of it was pretty much there. The investigators even found the crew's belongings and kitchenware scattered across the lake bottom. Once they got over the shock, they called in archaeologists to examine the site and create a 3-dimensional model of the wreck. This is the 5th major shipwreck Bayod and his team have found in the last 3 years, but the truth is, this region is full of mysteries still waiting to be uncovered. The F.J. King is just one of around 6,000 ships that were damaged or destroyed in incidents across the Great Lakes during the 1800s. And it's estimated that hundreds of these wrecks still remain hidden at the bottom of Lakes Superior, Michigan, Huron, Erie, and Ontario. Thankfully, discoveries like this one could become more and more common. In fact, more shipwrecks are being found today than at any other time in history. Advances in technology have made scanning the lake floor less expensive and more accessible, not just for professionals, but for amateurs too. And the profile of these modern-day shipwreck hunters has changed. Now, they're more often searching for wrecks for their historical value, not just to find treasure. Another project that could help uncover even more wrecks in the Great Lakes is called Lakebed 2030. It could change everything, as its goal is to map the entire lake floor. And right now, only about 15% has been explored. That means the Great Lakes might still be hiding their biggest secrets, and that, at the very least, is super exciting.
It's 2018. You get up early in the morning to go ashore and catch some fish. You come to the spot you were yesterday, throw the hook into the sea, and wait. The float is twitching. You've caught some fish, but hey, hello? Why aren't you doing anything? Right now, you don't care about the fish. You're looking at something in the distance. You open your mouth in surprise, since you see a huge ship stuck on a shoal. It wasn't here yesterday, so it got here at night. Okay, it'll probably sail away sooner or later. You fish for a few more hours. During this time, you observe the ship and notice no movement there. Is it empty? Boats and the Coastal Service are sailing from the shore to the vessel. You decide to check it out too. You get in your old boat and go there. The mist descends to the water, making the ship look creepy. The colossal vessel is rusty and empty. But where is the whole crew? And how did it get there? The Coast Guard comes on board. They search the hold, the cabins, and the upper deck. There's someone's stuff, some remnants of food supplies, notebooks, and clothes. Everything suggests the crew has disappeared for some reason. Fishers who noticed the vessel first didn't see anyone coming down from the board. No radio signals were sent to the port, and no one reported about the ship. It appeared here from nowhere. The only chance to get any information is to look at the number and name of the vessel. This is Sam Ratulangi, PB 1600. The Coast Guard checks the information, studies the data of all the country's ships, and no way. One company built the boat in 2001 in Indonesia. People used it to transport heavy loads across the seas around Asia. The ship had been properly operating for 8 years. People were delivering industrial goods to different points in the region, but something went wrong. In 2009, Sam Ratulangi was sailing near the coast of Taiwan, and that's it. There were no further records about it. There were no reports in any port. Everyone thought it must have drowned, so no one had been looking for it for years. And then, 9 years later, it appears here, big and rusty, off the coast of Myanmar, without sailors, without fuel. An investigation starts. City services are trying to find out the names of all the sailors working on the ship and find clues that would lead to solving this mystery. They also hope the ship owner will appear soon. They find 2 tow ropes on board. This means that some other ship towed Sam Ratulangi to this place. Then they identify and find 13 crew members. These people say they wanted to reach the factory in Bangladesh to repair Sam Ratulangi. Another vessel helped tow the ship, but then 2 cables tore off, and a storm began. No one wanted to stay on board during such weather, so the crew members left it. No one knows what the ship has been doing for the last 9 years, and how it was possible without people on board. And here's another, much more mysterious ship story. On February 16, 2020, locals found a large cargo ship stuck on a rocky shore off the coast of an Irish village. The boat looked rusty, with holes in the hull and rotten parts. People hadn't seen this vessel the day before, so it appeared there at night. The last time people saw the Alta cargo ship was a few months earlier, thousands of miles off the coast of Ireland. That day, the Alta was sailing in the waters of the Atlantic Ocean. Another ship, the MS Protector, noticed it. MS Protector crew members tried to contact the ship, but received no response. The people on board realized that they were facing an empty vessel. And then, 5 months later, it appeared near the coast of Ireland. There are more questions than answers in this story, but we managed to find something out. In 2015, the Alta appeared and disappeared from the radar several times. Any ship has an internal tracking system, so people can track its route using satellites. But Alta crew members often disabled this system. Perhaps they were engaged in some illegal activity. Anyway, in 2017, the ship often sailed between the ports of Greek islands. Then, the tracking signal disappeared and appeared only 10 months later, off the coast of North Africa. During this time, the ship changed several flags. In September 2018, the Alta was southeast of Bermuda and headed for Haiti. Then, the crew started facing problems. First, the main engine failed right in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. The ship began to drift. Several days passed, but the crew members weren't able to repair it. They began to run out of food and water supplies. The situation got even worse when they found out that a hurricane was approaching the place. Fortunately, they managed to contact the U.S. Coast Guard. A helicopter flew to the Alta on October 2nd to bring them some supplies. There was enough food for several days. Then, a rescue boat sailed to the ship. It evacuated all the sailors and delivered them to Puerto Rico before the hurricane. The Alta had to drift alone in the ocean. After a while, another ship approached the Alta to tow it to the shores of Guyana. But at this moment, everything went wrong. Someone stole the boat, disabled the tracking system, and sailed away in an unknown direction. After almost a year, the MS Protector found the empty Alta in the waters of the Atlantic Ocean. And then, 9 months later, the ship without a crew sailed to the shores of Ireland. How did it manage to travel across the Atlantic and get to the coast of Ireland? It's still a mystery. Maybe it was just luck. No one else saw the ship all this time. It was just covering huge distances, surviving storms. Who's the captain? What happened to the thieves? Who owns the ship now? One day, someone called the village administration and introduced themselves as the vessel owner. But that unknown person didn't provide any evidence. They found several barrels of oil on the ship, which they took away by helicopter. The Alta was rusting. Corrosion of metal could damage the environment. The vessel had no commercial value, yet it would have taken millions to get rid of it. There were 3 options for what to do: leave the ship where it was, tow it into the sea and let it sink, or disassemble it for scrap. But nature had its own plans. Storms and strong waves split the hull into 2 parts. The Alta was drifting without a crew in the waters of the Atlantic Ocean for about 2 years. But this is nothing compared to a ship that was traveling for 38 years. The record belongs to the SS Bayimo. It was a merchant vessel owned by some trading company. In 1931, the ship found itself on the ice off the coast of Alaska. Its movement slowed down. A thick layer of ice blocked the ship, and a strong storm only made the situation worse. The blizzard was so intense that the crew members couldn't see anything but a white veil in front of their eyes. Sailing any further was impossible. The team had to wait for the storm to end. They waited for a day, 2, 3 days. A week had passed, but the snowstorm was only getting stronger. Then, one day, it grew weaker. The crew members split into 2 teams. The first team went to the nearest city. The second group, along with the captain, stayed on board. They set up camp next to the ship and waited for the blizzard, which had started again, to end. There was 0 visibility. And finally, one day, the storm was over. Great! And now, wait a minute. But where is the ship? The SS Bayimo just disappeared during the blizzard. The captain was sure that the ship had sunk, so he left along with the crew. Then, a week later, they saw the vessel drifting near the area where they had lost it. The hull was damaged so severely that it was unsafe to sail on it. Repairing the ship would be pointless and expensive, so the captain decided to abandon it. He was sure that it would go underwater sooner or later, but it stayed afloat for the next few days, the next few months, and a few years. People had reported seeing it at various points along the coast of Alaska for 38 years. The last record of the SS Bayimo is dated 1969. Those who saw it claimed the ship was completely frozen, almost merged with the ice. Some people planned to start an expedition to find the ship, but all attempts were unsuccessful. The vessel is probably lying somewhere on the deep sea floor.
The Bermuda Triangle is one of the most heavily traveled shipping routes in the world. Some skeptics believe that this fact solves the Bermuda Triangle mystery. Statistically, the busier the area, the higher the frequency of accidents and disappearances. While this makes sense, it's not the frequency of disappearances that's responsible for the mystery of the Bermuda Triangle. It's the lack of explanation or wreckage found. On his very first voyage to the New World in 1492, Christopher Columbus sailed through the Bermuda Triangle. Columbus reported that one night, when he was on the deck of the ship, he noticed a giant light appear in the distance, unlike anything he'd ever seen before. Columbus looked at his compass for direction, and it gave off erratic readings. You might have noticed that the Bermuda Triangle doesn't appear on any world map. This is because official institutions refuse to acknowledge that the area actually exists. No one exactly knows how many ships and planes have disappeared in the Bermuda Triangle. The rough estimate is 50 ships and 20 planes. Most of the time, the disappearances had no explanation and no wreckage has ever been left behind. When the TBF Avenger planes went missing, a massive search operation was conducted. Boats and planes searched the Bermuda Triangle for any signs of the aircraft. One of the boats searching was a PBM-5 Mariner airboat. The airboat took flight at 7:27 p.m. and called in a routine radio message 3 minutes later. Then, it was never heard from again. No trace was ever found of the rescue airboat or the 5 Avenger aircraft. A huge investigation was launched into the disappearance of all these vehicles, but nothing was ever discovered. The Bermuda Triangle is home to some pretty intense and unexpected weather. Storms build up quickly and unexpectedly, then disappear soon after. If you blink, you might miss it. This could explain why few distress signals are issued. Pilots and sailors never saw the weather coming. A popular theory suggests that rogue waves are responsible for the many disappearances. Rogue waves are called extreme storm waves by scientists. They occur when different weather patterns take place at the same time and cause large unexpected waves that reach up to 100 feet tall. Witnesses say that the waves look like giant walls of water. These waves could explain why ships go down fast and without leaving any trace. Just off the coast of Japan, you'll find the Bermuda Triangle of the Pacific Ocean. They call it the Devil's Triangle. Between 1950 and 1954, 9 ships disappeared in this area without leaving a trace. The ship Kayo Maroon 5 was sent to investigate these unexplained disappearances when it also vanished. After this incident, the Japanese authorities labeled the area as a danger zone, and sailors were encouraged to avoid it. Some people blame all disasters on the extraterrestrial paranormal activity. Others suppose it's all about raging natural phenomena. Some scientists believe the cause of anomalies is the environmental changes. Also, there's a really high concentration of methane hydrates on the bottom of the ocean in the Pacific Bermuda area. This gas tends to set off, and when it happens, bubbles start forming on the surface of the water. These gas eruptions can interrupt the ability to float and can easily sink a ship. Because of this chemical reaction, there won't be even a trace left. Underwater volcanoes are said to be another possible explanation for the Japanese Dragon's Triangle. In fact, they can take down even small islands. Luckily, nobody lives there. It's a pretty common thing in this area that some of them disappear underwater and others appear out of the blue because of seismic activity. You'll never find the Dragon's Triangle on any official map of the world, so nobody's quite sure about how large it is in reality. In July 2015, 2 teenagers disappeared after setting sail off the coast of Florida. There's some mystery about what the 2 teens were really getting up to. They told their parents that they were just going to fish, but they told their friends that they were crossing to the Bahamas. Shortly after they left, a line of thunderstorms moved towards the area, and the boys were never heard from again. A massive search was conducted, but sadly, nothing was found. 1 year later, the pair's boat was found off the coast of Bermuda with a broken iPhone and some personal effects left inside. One of the most popular and bizarre theories trying to solve the Bermuda Triangle mystery comes from Charles Berlitz. He insists that the area is home to the lost city of Atlantis. The missing ships and planes and malfunctioning equipment, according to him, were all caused by rays of energy let out by the special energy crystals that power Atlantis. While this sounds silly, Berlitz's theory was convincing enough that over 20 million people bought his book worldwide. Previously, the compass wouldn't work well in the Bermuda Triangle since the lines of the 2 poles coincided here, true north and magnetic north. But if you fall into this line, your compass will behave strangely. But the magnetic north is constantly shifting, and now it's far beyond the triangle. No legend says pirates of the last centuries operate in the Bermuda Triangle, or that the Flying Dutchman makes other ships disappear. A popular theory is that ships travel to the distant past or future through a time portal in the Bermuda Triangle. Fortunately, these are all myths. Just imagine hundreds of giant tentacles reaching out to a group of ships sailing through the Bermuda Triangle. In the past centuries, they could easily sink an entire fleet, since the ships were made of wood and were lighter. Squids wrapped decks with their strong tentacles, made holes in the ship's hulls with their sharp beaks. Toothy suction cups could break the masts and tear the sails. The water was filling the holds and slowly rising to the deck. The ship sank in a matter of minutes. Survivors reached the shore and told everyone about huge monsters. This is how the legends of the Kraken appeared. Fortunately, now people have sonars and equipment for monitoring the sea space. They say the main reason why this place is so enigmatic must be the magnetic fields that form this ominous triangle. Ocean floor is made of rocks containing a lot of magnetite. It's more like iron. Magnetic fields react to the high concentration of magnetite on the ocean floor, which may start a sort of conflict between the two. It can often lead to various weather anomalies and, as a result, navigation issues. And naturally, any changes in the ocean floor or the Earth's magnetic fields influence the Bermuda Triangle a lot. Magnetic fields tend to shift their position, so do tectonic plates and even the continents, even though we never notice it. The skies are usually very clear there, but back in 1883, some people witnessed abnormal things in the area. Some claim to have seen large blocks of ice falling from the skies, and the crew even managed to save one as hard proof. Seems like the Bermuda Triangle has an alternate not only on Earth, but even in space. Spacecraft usually don't disappear into thin air though, like there's no air. This anomalous area is really large and stretches right above the South Atlantic. It occupies the area from Chile to Zimbabwe and sits right at the point where Van Allen radiation belts are the closest to the surface of our planet. The Earth has two such belts, which come in handy trapping the particles that shoot in from the Sun. They do a great job protecting the Earth from radiation. The magnetic field there is lower, so it allows the Earth's radiation belt to come closer to the surface. Whenever a satellite passes by, it will be exposed to radiation, which might lead to serious damage. So, no satellite can take pictures of it. The South Atlantic anomaly is part of the Earth where natural radiation just flows out of control. Still, there is little evidence that all these triangles are really dangerous. Many believe the Bermuda Triangle itself has been proven time and again to be nothing but a work of fiction. In fact, some shipwrecks, such as the Ellen Austin, gained popularity in the middle of the 20th century, while nobody even thought of drawing a triangle in the Bermuda area before that. The mystery was popularized by science fiction writers and became a common myth, while no serious research proved it any more dangerous than other parts of the world's ocean. So, the crew of the Ellen Austin back in 1881 weren't even aware of the Bermuda Triangle back then, let alone afraid of it. What do you think?
The sea, this unrelenting water beast, has been defying all attempts to tame it for centuries. Many ships driven by the wind have gone through the harshest parts of the world. Some have survived the struggle with the sea, and many have come off second best. It's the year 1834. A ship called the Pilgrim is setting a course to sail from California to Boston. The journey will venture around South America and then past Cape Horn of Chile. Richard signs up as a merchant seaman aboard the Pilgrim. This is his first voyage at sea. The crew tells Richard stories of the Drake Passage off Cape Horn, a route that's legendary for its dangers. Countless ships and sailors have disappeared in those waters. Since Cape Horn's discovery in 1526, it's quickly become known to all those that have sailed around it as the ultimate test of any mariner's skill and of any ship's strength. Those that have survived the journey call Cape Horn a sailor's nightmare. Jack the helmsman, a salty veteran, steers the ship towards this most dangerous of all routes. Jack has been aboard the Pilgrim since it was first commissioned in 1825. He's passed by the Horn many times, each time learning a different lesson from the tests provided by the sea. The Pilgrim has been refitted since its past voyage a year ago. Richard values Jack's experience, given that it's his first journey at sea. Jack assures Richard of his confidence in the Pilgrim, even though it's just a small wooden brig with 2 masts. Jack's aware that wooden vessels are gradually becoming outdated, replaced by new steam-powered ships. But Jack prefers the maneuverability of the Pilgrim and would take it over the steel ships any day. Richard is excited to be aboard. There's so much to explore in life as a merchant seaman, but the guy struggles to acquire his sea legs on the boat. Forceful winds make the Pilgrim move faster, providing Richard with a quick introduction to life at sea. At the same time, nothing can prepare him for what is to be experienced at Cape Horn. It's the southernmost point of land before Antarctica. The gap between the icy continent and Cape Horn holds the infamous Drake Passage. Approximately 700 miles between Cape Horn and the Antarctic Peninsula. Strong winds provide an uninterrupted, steadfast journey toward the Horn. But, as Jack tells Richard, the winds are more concentrated at the Drake Passage. They create a funneling effect, becoming stronger and more unpredictable. Richard is unsure of what this might mean for the Pilgrim, but understands that there's no easier route to travel around South America. A few days pass. The Pilgrim sails by the many islands that make up the western coast of Chile. Although the sea has been relatively calm, Richard continues to deal with his lack of sea legs. His movements are still not very graceful. The constant, ever-swaying deck rises and falls, and Richard finds it hard to get used to the motion. Random large waves hit the Pilgrim from every angle. The ship is quickly approaching Cape Horn. Richard looks towards great thunderous black clouds in the distance. "Welcome to the Horn," Jack says, half laughing. A wry smile upon his face soon disappears. The man gets serious, knowing what awaits them all. Stronger winds start blowing the sails as the crew scrambles to hang onto the ropes. Richard desperately sets to adjust the aft sails, adjusting for the constant change in strong southerly winds. Jack holds firm at the helm, knowing the importance of his role. He's wary of the swell. It can build very quickly the further south they travel. It's crucial the Pilgrim doesn't venture too close to the Horn when they approach. The great darkness that was in the distance is now all around them, filling the sky in every direction. Blackened clouds throw rain and hail down at the crew as they try to resist the enraged weather. Jack is directed by the captain at the helm, changing the direction of the vessel. The temperature has dropped significantly. Barely keeping the water from his eyes, he turns toward the port side bow to provide his face a brief break from the torment of the wind. Looking out into the distance, the man sees the Horn standing alone, surrounded by mist. It's a haunting sight. He steers the Pilgrim along the face of the Horn, the distance getting shorter. The waves shrink in height since the depths become shallower. But these waves are much steeper, and their angle can cause more damage to the wooden vessel. Jack's unsure how much of these waves the Pilgrim can take before the hull is breached. Richard, still posted at the aft sails, watches the water and icebergs floating by. He's unsure how large they actually are, since they're mostly hidden underwater. But he knows to alert Jack if any get too close. Just one iceberg hitting the Pilgrim will be all that the hull can withstand. Dutifully, he watches over the side and into the distance. Icebergs aren't the only thing to look out for. Rogue waves are common in these seas as well. The connecting Antarctic and Pacific Oceans, mixed with stormy weather, form waves together. This creates much larger rogue waves. Such waves have been known to reach up to 100 feet tall. They can destroy most vessels in their path. It'll surely be the end of the Pilgrim if it comes across a rogue wave. Strong currents adjust the route of the Pilgrim, as though the Horn is trying to lure the ship toward its rocky shallows. Slowly, they are getting pulled closer toward the Horn. Jack is fighting the current at the helm. Spinning the wheel, he strains his body as much as he can. Grunting, he plunges the wheel from the port side to starboard and back again. The captain keeps yelling directions. To a novice, they're extremely confusing. But Jack, a hardened veteran, continues to interpret the directions with ease, steering to readjust their course away from the Horn. The captain orders Richard to assess the hull below the decks. With the level of pounding the Drake Passage has provided so far, it's surely harmed the ship in some way. Richard runs to the deck as another sailor yells something at him, but the noise of the sea makes it difficult to hear. A wave hits the side, flowing onto the deck. Richard manages to hang onto the mast before he's almost swept overboard. The entire front deck seems to be underwater. Hanging on as the water rolls off the sides of the ship and waiting for it to clear, Richard watches the Horn slowly go past. Still, it beckons toward the Pilgrim, as though asking for its dues from the crew. The currents are still pulling the ship, while the storm is raging on, with no end of the struggle in sight. The storm is growing ever larger and fiercer. Richard gathers himself to head below and assess the damage. After a slow descent to the lower decks, Richard can finally look over the hull from the ship's quarters. There's no damage from what he can gather. But he's shocked by the depth of the water inside. It's now at waist depth. Cups, amongst other things, float in the water. Even inside the ship, the guy can't escape the waves. Unable to make sense of it all, he stands frozen, listening to the almighty power of Mother Nature outside. The sea roars even more wildly, waves constantly thudding against the hull. It sounds like a somber drumbeat, a slow countdown to the demise of the Pilgrim. Richard forces himself back to the terrors of the above decks, grasping onto the rails to carefully walk the slippery stairs. He leaves the disturbing creaks of the wooden decks. They're soon replaced with the strained sounds of the ropes, the yells of other sailors, and the deafening roar of the sea crashing all around him. Jack is at the helm, focused on his role, still fighting the wind and the waves, even with the addition of ice and frost. It seems that the world around him has set its heart to distract the man from his duty, but Jack pushes on determinedly. For 9 days, the Pilgrim fights the constant changes in stormy weather, facing all kinds of obstacles, but the ship manages to make it through. As they leave the storm behind, the crew sets their course north for their final destination. The sight of the sun peeking through the dark clouds is the most relieving thing Richard has ever experienced. Unfortunately, Richard lost his rations at some stage during the storm. At sea, if your rations are lost, it's your own bad luck. Luckily, Jack is kind enough to share some of his.
The voyage started just like any other. The cargo ship SS Cotopaxi is making another journey to Havana, Cuba, to deliver coal. It's November 29, 1925. For Captain Meyer and his crew, leaving Charleston Port, South Carolina, it will be the last trip the ship ever makes. Its route ran through the Bermuda Triangle. 2 days into the trip, the Cotopaxi sent out a distress signal. It had got caught up in a strong tropical storm and turned over on its side. The wind was very strong and there was powerful lightning as well. Rain gradually filled the ship's hold. Then there was a bright white flash, and the ship disappeared without a trace. Later, its wreckage was found in the Gobi Desert, which is in a completely different part of the world. All 32 crew members, including the captain, were missing. Of course, the part about the Gobi Desert is fictional. For one of his movies, Steven Spielberg came up with the idea that the ship was moved there by aliens. Still, in real life, the ship was never found, and its crew really did disappear. It was officially declared missing a month afterward, and nobody could find the wreck. It seems like a classic case of mysterious things going on in the Bermuda Triangle. But most mysteries are solved sooner or later. In 2020, the Cotopaxi was found. A man named Michael Barnett had moved to Florida to study shipwrecks off the coast. One wreck in particular really caught his attention. It was much larger than the others, and the locals called it the Bear Wreck. It was about 40 miles from St. Augustine in northern Florida, but no one had ever managed to identify the rusty hull. So Michael started to do some detective work. He measured the size of the shipwreck and started working through all the information he could find. He researched hundreds of old newspapers, leafed through insurance records, and looked at artifacts found on the wreck. After hundreds of hours of hard work, Michael was sure it was the Cotopaxi. But a few years before, there had been a rumor that the same ship had been found off the coast of Cuba. The Coast Guard found the wreck of a cargo ship about the same size that looked a lot like the one lost in 1925. Michael was sure they were wrong, so he teamed up with some science journalists and kept investigating. Soon they discovered something that seemed to confirm Michael's belief. Divers found brass valves with the letters SV on them in the wreckage of the ship. Michael suggested these initials referred to Scott Valve Manufacturing Company. The headquarters of this company was in Michigan, not far from where the Cotopaxi had been built. The company had probably supplied parts for the Cotopaxi. So the puzzle seemed to be solved. The Bear Wreck was really the missing cargo ship. But Michael still needed to work out why the ship had sunk. Did something mysterious really happen to the Cotopaxi in the Bermuda Triangle? Later, Michael found the testimony of the ship's carpenter among some old papers. The carpenter claimed that the hatches covering the coal on the ship had been in a terrible condition before it sank. Repair work on the covers wasn't finished before the crew got the order to sail to Cuba. So if the hatch covers were still broken during the trip, water could have easily gotten on board. This water probably flooded the hold during the tropical storm. This was the real reason why the Cotopaxi went down. There was really nothing mysterious about it. It was just a mistake made by ordinary people. But this is just one example out of dozens, or even hundreds, where ships and planes have gone missing in the Bermuda Triangle. We still can't explain some of these incidents. It seems like there really is something weird going on there. One of these strange events happened in 1948. A passenger jet was headed for Miami from San Juan, Puerto Rico. It disappeared in the same area as the Cotopaxi. The 32 people on board vanished without a trace. The weather was clear throughout the flight, but experts think that when the plane was about 50 miles from the coast, it could have been hit by a strong wind that knocked it off course. Years later, a similar plane was found in the area of the Bermuda Triangle, but because no one could work out the registration, it was impossible to say for sure if it was the same one. Something even stranger occurred not long before, in 1945. 5 planes went missing all at the same time. Some trainee pilots were practicing their navigation skills, but when they'd finished, it seems they couldn't find their way back home and disappeared. Many people assume they just ran out of fuel. This seems likely, but still, the circumstances were really strange. The trainees were being supervised by an experienced pilot who had 2,500 hours of flight time. He would never have let a group of newbie pilots get that far away from their base. Even now, people still debate what could have happened. Some insist the pilots ran into something supernatural out there in the Bermuda Triangle. But who knows? And here's another freaky thing that happened there which no expert has been able to explain. Time travel. In 1970, Bruce Gernon was flying a plane from Andros Island to the Florida coast. When he was at 11,500 feet, a giant cloud appeared in front of him. It kept getting bigger and bigger, and he had no choice but to fly through it. As soon as he did, the plane was surrounded by darkness. It was as if the day had turned to night in a split second. Suddenly, Bruce began to see white flashes of light around him. They were so bright that they lit up the entire sky. But they weren't lightning bolts, although he couldn't really explain what they were. The plane continued through the strange cloud for almost a half an hour. Bruce noticed that the cloud changed shape during this time. The space around the plane turned into a tunnel. Then the tunnel started narrowing. Bruce became really tense as he tried to cope with the plane's controls. All his instruments and navigation equipment were going crazy, and the electronics stopped working. Then, a white light appeared at the end of the tunnel. Just like in the movies, the plane escaped the closing cloud tunnel at the very last second. Everything was fine, but now Bruce found himself in some white fog. He had no idea where he was. Then he managed to contact ground control. He was shocked when he learned that his plane was already in the airspace above Miami. It seemed that something impossible had happened. Bruce was meant to cover a distance of about 250 miles during the flight. This usually took 1.5 hours, but he had managed it in just 47 minutes, almost 2 times faster than normal. When Bruce landed, he went to check the amount of fuel left in the tank. It turned out he'd used up a lot less than the normal amount of fuel as well. Could there be a logical explanation for the time-traveling plane? Well, records show that a large number of sunspots were detected on the surface of the sun that day, and there was a strong solar wind. This could easily have made the electronics and devices on the plane go crazy. But what about the mysterious cloud? The Florida coast is a place where two large air currents meet. One has a high pressure and the other is a low pressure one. This causes a lot of storm clouds in the area. But people still debate how Bruce was able to cover the distance so quickly. Some people say that some kind of mysterious dark energy was involved. Others say it was a gravitational anomaly that curves space and time. Others think that Bruce is just a fraud. We still don't know the truth. So, is there really something supernatural about the Bermuda Triangle? Or is it all just coincidences and made-up stories? The truth is that no more planes and ships disappear in the Bermuda Triangle than anywhere else in the world. Far out in the open sea on a perfectly calm day, a dot appears on the horizon. It grows in size as it gets closer, and soon you can see it's a ship. But when you look at it through the spyglass, chills go down your spine. The vessel is in perfect condition and its cargo is on board, but it's completely devoid of people, drifting listlessly along the current. That was what the captain of the Ellen Austin saw in 1881, and what brought his crew so many sorrows. In December of the previous year, the Ellen Austin, a big 210-foot-long ship, left the port of Liverpool to make its trip to New York. The ship was carrying a load of people hoping to find a better life in the New World. Captain A.J. Griffin took the vessel due southwest for a shorter voyage, and a few weeks into 1881, they found themselves north of the Sargasso Sea, known for its lack of winds and strong circling currents. Ships that got caught in those could lose control and keep on drifting in circles until they were dragged into the center. From there, they'd be incredibly lucky to get back past the currents, but more often than not, they stayed in the desolate desert of the sea forever. Worse still, the area belonged to the notorious Bermuda Triangle, which was already known to take down ships and make them disappear without a trace. The ship's crew were nervous, afraid of being in such a dangerous area so close to a sea that could bring them to a standstill. And ominously, some of the Sargasso Sea's calm must have escaped it, because the Ellen Austin lost its speed one day and fell adrift without the winds. It was fine, though. They had ample provisions and were still on schedule. Captain Griffin was walking around his ship, giving orders in a voice full of calm authority, and both his crew and passengers trusted him completely. But then, the lookout shouted from above that a ship was in sight. And indeed, when the captain looked in the direction the man was pointing, he saw a small schooner moving slowly into view and towards the Ellen Austin. As it came closer, it became apparent that the way the strange vessel moved wasn't right. The captain frowned and examined it through his spyglass. The schooner was untouched, but eerily silent. There wasn't a single soul on board. Derelict ships weren't that rare in the Atlantic at the time, but neither were pirates. Captain Griffin decided to wait and watch. After 2 days, the schooner was as quiet as always, and Captain finally thought it was fine to move in. He took a small team of sailors and boarded the stranded ship. There was nobody there indeed, but luck seemed to be on Griffin's side. The precious cargo of mahogany wood was still in the holds. The captain returned to the Ellen Austin and ordered his select men to take the smaller ship along to New York. The crew's spirits arose with the prospect of riches awaiting them upon arrival. When the winds blew strong again, the Ellen Austin continued its voyage, with the unnamed vessel tagging along. But after a couple of days, the ships were caught in a powerful storm and got separated. The wind, rain, and waves beat them for several days in a row. When the weather finally cleared, Captain Griffin ordered to find the schooner. They searched for another day until they finally found it adrift, way off the course. Griffin hailed his men on board the smaller ship, but no one answered. A party of sailors went to investigate and returned with their faces white with fear. The whole prize crew went missing in the storm. The captain wasn't one to lose such a valuable find, though, and ordered another team to take control of the schooner. Reluctantly, the sailors obeyed, and the two ships continued their voyage. They agreed to stay as close as possible to one another and ring their bells at set intervals at night to let each other know they were fine. Several nights went all right, with bells ringing reassuringly every hour. But one day, a thick blanket of fog fell on the sea and almost completely blocked their vision. The ships went on regardless and started sounding their bells earlier. When night came, the fog was still there, but the bells were the sound of life. Until they stopped. Captain Griffin rang the bell once, then twice. No answer. The crew lit the fires and looked out into the sea intently, but the fog hadn't lifted, and they couldn't see a thing in the swirling abyss beyond the ship's board. Nobody could sleep that night, and they waited in silence until the break of dawn. The first rays of sun made the fog slowly disperse, and the whole crew went to the edge of the deck with heavy hearts. There was still hope in them, until the last strands of the mist went away, revealing a vast, calm, and most importantly, empty ocean. The nameless schooner was gone, and so was the second team of the Ellen Austin sailors. The ship sailed the rest of the way to New York in grave silence. Once it arrived at the port, the passengers were only too happy to leave the vessel, and no one so much as turned their head as a goodbye. That was the ship's last voyage as the Ellen Austin. That same year, it was sold to a German shipping company and renamed Meta. No one ever found the derelict schooner or the sailors that went missing with it. And that would probably be the end of this mysterious and unresolved story, if it held at least a little bit of the truth. In reality, none of the enigmatic things in the narrative actually happened. The Ellen Austin did indeed leave Liverpool and headed southwest to New York, and its captain was really A.J. Griffin, taking people to the American continent. But from here, the story falls apart. First of all, the ship went way too far to the north to pass the Sargasso Sea so closely. There was simply no reason to make a detour so broad. Even though the westerly winds were strong, it was still faster to take them head-on than to go in a southerly direction. So the Ellen Austin was probably nowhere near the Sargasso Sea and the Bermuda Triangle. Secondly, the triangle itself has been proven time and again to be nothing but a work of fiction. In fact, it gained popularity in the middle of the 20th century, while nobody even thought of drawing a triangle in the Bermuda area before that. The mystery was popularized by science fiction writers and became a common myth, while no serious research proved it any more dangerous than other parts of the world's ocean. So the crew of the Ellen Austin weren't even aware of the Bermuda Triangle back then, let alone afraid of it. Thirdly, the whole story was told and retold by magazines and mystery-loving personalities with ever-changing details. It first appeared in a newspaper in 1906 and already had the date wrong. The article said the voyage took place in 1891 instead of 1881. Later, the story resurfaced in 1935 on the radio with the wrong name of the captain. It was Baker, not Griffin. The date was also off, saying the trip was taken in August 1881, when the Ellen Austin was already renamed Meta. The legend grew upon with other strange details, such as the ship's route from London to Newfoundland, which was never the case. But the final debunking came from the archives of Lloyd's of London, the marine insurance market that keeps all logs of trade and emigration ship routes. The documents there say that on February 1881, the Ellen Austin completed its cross-Atlantic voyage to New York without incident. Captain A.J. Griffin off-boarded the ship with all his crew hale and hearty and declared no loss of hands during the trip. The voyage took over 2 months because the ship had to fight strong westerly winds pushing it back towards Britain. The crew reported no strange encounters on the way, and the whole thing was as boring as could be. And even the passengers must have been smiling when they stepped on the American soil at last, unaware of the phony baloney story they were about to be a part of.
The moon shines brightly and illuminates the black water of the ocean. thick fog descends on it in ominous silence. Then, it's suddenly broken by the creaking of wooden boards, followed by a rippling of the waves. Through the fog, you see the outline of an old, large ship. Its hull is rusty, and a strange cold is coming from it. But the most unsettling thing is that there's no one on the deck. The ship sails without a crew. No, this isn't a mythical Flying Dutchman, but a very real ghost ship. September 2nd, 2019. The British Royal Navy's ice patrol ship, called the HMS Protector, sails through the calm waters of the Atlantic Ocean. The time is 11 p.m. Some of the ship's crew are on deck, while others are sleeping in their cabins. The captain steers the ship and looks straight at the horizon. The sky is lit up by an orange twilight, and clouds float in the distance. Suddenly, against this beautiful landscape, one of the sailors notices the black silhouette of an unknown ship. The captain slows down and steers the ship a little closer to the mysterious vessel. This is an old cargo ship, 250 feet long. Attempts to contact the crew members lead to nothing. It seems the unknown boat is floating in the ocean by itself. There's no one on board, at least, no one alive. The deck of the ship creaks from rocking on the waves. The sun sinks below the horizon, and it gets dark. The ship looks terrifying. British sailors don't dare to climb on that strange deck. They take a photo, post it on the internet, and sail away. Many people on the internet will assume the sailors met a real ghost ship. 5 months later, we're in the village of Ballycotton in County Cork, Ireland. A local leaves the house early in the morning to go for a daily run. Music in his headphones, fresh cool air, and a scenic route are ideal conditions for a good workout. The jogger runs along the road on the coast of the Celtic Sea. There was a strong storm last night, and now the sea looks calm. The man runs along the top of a low cliff and notices a huge vessel. An old rusty cargo ship 250 feet long lies on the beach, right among the rocks. No people on board. It seems the ship has been here for ages, but the local is sure this vessel wasn't here yesterday. A little later, it turns out this is the same ship that the sailors from the HMS Protector saw 5 months ago, thousands of miles from this place. The cargo ship, called the Alta, was built in 1976. Nobody knows who used it all this time and for what purposes. It's only known that in 2017, the ship was purchased by a new owner and marked with the flag of Tanzania. It's important to say that almost all cargo ships are equipped with AIS, Automatic Identification System, which is needed to track ship movements in the ocean. Since 2015, something strange started happening with the Alta's AIS. The ship disappeared from the satellites, then reappeared again. Over the past few years, this ship had changed several names and flags. It's not surprising that its AIS shut off and turned on numerous times. It's said that some of those who disable AIS on their ships do so to hide outlaw activities. The ship's captain, whoever it was, clearly didn't want to show the Alta's movements. As AIS showed in 2017, the ship had sailed near Greek port cities. The Alta made 12 stops in 3 such cities in different parts of Greece. Then, the AIS signal disappeared, and 10 months later, the Alta reappeared near the northern coast of Africa, 1,200 miles from Greece. In September of 2018, the ship was sailing about 1,400 miles southeast of Bermuda, and at that time, the crew members started having problems. There were 10 people on board the Alta. On September 19th, the ship's engine failed right in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. The nearest shore was very far away. The ship began to drift. As days passed, the crew couldn't fix the vessel. Food supplies were running low. The crew started to panic and tried to contact someone. The situation got worse as a strong hurricane was approaching the place where the ship broke down. Crew members contacted the U.S. Coast Guard. On October 2nd, a helicopter headed towards the ship. Food and water were unloaded on the Alta. This was enough for the crew to bide their time for several days. About a week later, a rescue boat sailed about 1,500 miles to reach the Alta and help the stranded sailors. Shortly before the start of the hurricane, American rescuers succeeded. The entire crew of the wrecked ship was taken to Puerto Rico. The Alta remained drifting in the ocean. After a while, another ship arrived to tow it to the coast of Guyana. Then, something went wrong again. The ship was hijacked. Who did it and why remains a mystery to this day. But then, for some unknown reason, the thieves decided to abandon the ship and left it to drift in the ocean. For almost a year, the ship's location couldn't be tracked. Then, in September 2019, the vessel was found by the British Royal Navy. How the Alta was able to cover the distance across the Atlantic and wash up on the coast of Ireland is unknown. An investigation has been launched in Ireland. It's necessary to identify the owner of the vessel and find a responsible person to take on the task of towing it. But no one has since been found. Once, an unknown person called the Irish authorities and introduced themselves as the owner of the ship, but didn't provide any evidence. Several barrels of oil were found on board the Alta. To dismantle the ship, the Irish authorities will need to spend about 10 million euros. Local residents are annoyed by the wreck too. Corroding metal is bad for the environment, and kids have already snuck on board and posted a video on the internet from inside the abandoned ship. The further fate of the Alta remains unresolved. It's still lying there. That ship sailed in the ocean for just 2 years. Now imagine if some other managed to drift for 38. In all that time, no one could catch this ship, and people still seek it. That vessel is called the SS Bayimo. It was a merchant ship owned by a Canadian trading company. In 1931, the ship got stuck in ice off the coast of Alaska. A strong snowstorm began. The team waited a week for it to end, but the storm only intensified. One day, the weather improved a bit, and part of the team was evacuated to the nearest city. Another part of the crew, with the captain, set up camp near the ship. The storm started again and didn't stop for a long time. The blizzard was so heavy that the ship's captain couldn't see beyond his arm's reach. Finally, when the storm was over, the captain saw that the ship simply vanished. He decided the Bayimo sank during the storm. A week later, the ship was found, drifting near the place where it was lost. The hull of the ship was damaged so badly that it was unsafe to sail on it. The captain decided to abandon the ship. However, it didn't sink. For the next 38 years, it was drifting at various points along the Alaskan coast. Several times, people climbed on the ship, including native Alaskan residents and a group of researchers. Attempts to save the vessel from the sea ended in failure. The salvage operations were hampered by drifting ice and bad weather. The last time it was seen was in 1969. The ship was frozen and blocked by the ice. In 2006, the government created a special project to find the Bayimo. However, in all these years, the ship still hasn't been found. Its fate is unknown. It's likely that the ship has finally found peace and is now lying on the seabed of the Chukchi Sea. Humanity's facing the greatest danger ever. Our sun's fading. In 500 years, the entire solar system will be plunged into darkness and eternal cold. To save our civilization, people begin to build a huge spaceship that will accommodate the population of the whole world inside and go into deep space. In less than 400 years, the construction of the ship is finally completed. The sun is already nearing its end. It's much smaller and cooler, making the climate on Earth cold and harsh. You and the rest of the inhabitants of the planet are going on board the greatest ship in history. The boarding itself began several years ago, before the ship was even fully built. To avoid a multi-billion crowd, an electronic schedule was organized, sending invitations to those whose turn it was to board soon. Several million people could board within a month. The main rule is to travel light. You bring 2 sets of clothing, personal hygiene items, a phone, headphones, and your favorite book. You arrive to the boarding site and see a huge ark the size of a large island, twice the height of the Empire State Building. Around the ship, there's a huge city clinging to its walls. Construction workers and engineers have been living here for decades. You're standing in a long line, one of 100. Access to the ship is granted to those who have a valid ID. The ID is linked to that person's resting area. One person is given 20 square feet of space. There's a bed and a nightstand inside. Of course, there would need to be much less space if people would just lay down in sleep capsules and flew to a new planet. But no planet suitable for life has been found yet. So, the ship is going to be your home for a long time. Much of the ship's space is occupied by the engine room. Huge power generators and powerful engines will support the long-term movement of a heavy ship in outer space. At last, the boarding and settlement is over. The engines are starting. A voice is coming from the speakers throughout the ship, counting down from 10. These are your last seconds on Earth. The Ark takes off, burning down the whole area it was standing on. People look down at their receding home with sadness, but it's replaced with hope as they turn their gazes to the skies. The whole ship is divided into 200 large sections, varying in size. Each section is a country. Despite this division, the rules on the ship are the same for everyone. Generate energy, keep the peace, and help each other. The energy is produced by exercise bikes. A person pedals and generates kinetic energy that fuels the engines. This is everyone's daily duty. For at least an hour every morning, you take an exercise bike and work out, ensuring normal operation of the ship, maintaining your physical activity, and reducing stress. Then you eat and go to work. Here, just like on Earth, you pass by shops, libraries, and cinemas. The currency is unified for everyone on board. With the money you earn, you can move from your small cabin to a larger one. And of course, just like on Earth, some people easily get a lot of money, while others work 24/7 for a penny. This inequality doesn't bother you so much as it used to, though. People of the future have learned to appreciate peace and quiet, so no one risks to fight in the limited living space amidst the black void. Throughout the ship, there are nature zones. These are small botanical gardens that are grown with the help of artificial light. Plants give oxygen to the ship and help people feel more at home. Water reserves are large, but still limited. To help conserve it, people process their bodily fluids. They're collected in special tanks, filtered, carefully purified, and then sent back to the drinking and technical water vessels. Every person turns over 50% of their waste into water. Fresh water is replenished from space itself. Once every few years, the ship approaches a planet. With the help of scanners and X-rays, geologists find underground rivers or lakes. Then they send a drilling rig there, pump out the necessary amount of water, and pull it back to the ship. Unfortunately, there's nothing useful on these planets except water. Most planets don't have an atmosphere and are unsuitable for human life. People are looking for a place with ideal conditions. They're looking for the Earth's double. With the help of modern food technologies, scientists have managed to replace natural vegetables, fruits, and meat with artificial ones. Real apples or potatoes are also available, but they're rare and extremely pricey. Now, the ship's been plowing the expanses of space for several decades. People are used to their new way of life. Children are born, generations change. The kids born and raised on the space ark listen wide-eyed to stories of old people about how beautiful life was on Earth. But with every passing year, fewer and fewer of those who remember their home planet are left on the ship. The Ark's children are slowly coming to accept that the ship may remain their home forever, but they still continue to search. Scientists use powerful telescopes and equipment to explore space, and every day they seek potentially habitable planets. Still, nothing's nearby. The most promising worlds are thousands of light years away from the ship. Meanwhile, the peaceful spirit of the first generation of Ark dwellers is gone. People begin to break the rules, and discontent is growing. Not everyone pedals the bikes now, and power failures become more frequent. Social inequality is a burning issue. Some parts of the ship have turned into slums, while others have grown into abodes of luxury. Equipment gradually wears down, making it difficult to extract water, and most plants in nature zones wither because of the clogged ventilation systems. To save more energy, some parts of the ship are cut off from air and electrical supply. People who lived in those areas have to move to the central part of the ship. The already cramped space becomes even stuffier, and with the lack of personal space comes growing irritation. Soon, it becomes obvious there's no other way out but to create a faster-than-light engine, or FTL. It would require major refurbishments and changes to the ship's structure. The matter is up for a vote, and surprisingly, not everyone agrees. Some people don't want to take any risks and are already used to considering the ship their home. They want to use the ship's resources for global repairs. People's opinions are divided. Conflict is inevitable, and humanity risks disappearing from the universe. Resolution comes, unexpectedly, from impending danger. It turns out that the ship is heading towards a wide and unusually dense asteroid belt. The celestial bodies are packed so tight they leave hardly any space for the ship to maneuver. A collision at the current speed is inevitable. The only hope left for humanity is to go all out on building the FTL engine. The work takes months, but it's united people once more. Everyone works around the clock and only sleeps as much as they need to regain strength. While half the people help build the engine, the other half pedal the bikes to generate energy. There's once again a glitter of hope that humanity will be able to find a new world with enough space for everyone. The risks are sky high, but there's no choice. The energy is only enough for a single attempt to jump. If it fails, humankind could be stranded in outer space on a broken starship. Before the jump, people send a capsule with information about humanity into space. They upload videos, movies, music, and the entire history of humankind onto several massive hard drives. This is the only chance to leave a small footprint in the universe if they don't succeed. Everyone is ready. All power is transferred to the engine. People lie down in small capsules and put on oxygen masks. Theirs is a single desire: to wake up in a new world or not at all. No one's ready to watch the fall of humanity. Capsules are locked. People close their eyes. The engine is on. The countdown begins. 3, 2, 1, jump.
April 12th, in the year 2212. It's a great date for humanity, the 300th anniversary of the launch of the legendary Titanic. The best engineers of the world have collaborated for years to bring their masterpiece to the public, the Space Tanic, and they've done it just in time. The glorious spaceship is waiting in its harbor under the limelight, photographed by thousands of people. The trip was scheduled for April 12th, just like 300 years ago. Finally, the big day has come. The passengers are going on board the most magnificent spaceship of the time. They call it unbreachable. It has 12 decks, from the third class closer to the bottom to the most luxurious first class on the top, with panoramic views of outer space. The ship is preparing for launch. The engines are starting, the final countdown has begun, and the Space Tanic is off into the sky. It quickly becomes no more than a speck in the big blue and then disappears. The first day of the flight goes perfectly. The ship leaves the Earth's atmosphere in less than an hour, and passengers enjoy the wonderful view outside. The blue and green planet on the backdrop of the black void of space. The ship slows down a bit as it moves into orbit. There are too many satellites and space debris circling around the Earth. The Space Tanic has to go carefully and maneuver around the chunks of metal floating in zero-G. One of them heads straight towards the ship, but it turns on the side burners and moves out of the way just in time. The scrap floats by safely. Finally, the ship is out of the danger zone and into the big black. It turns on the back thrusters to accelerate and heads to the bright side of the moon. It's going to be the first destination of the sightseeing tour. The planet becomes gradually smaller behind, and about halfway to the natural satellite, people on board can marvel at the sight of the sun. The huge ball of burning plasma is bigger and brighter than ever in the cosmic darkness. Suddenly, the ship's captain makes an announcement. All passengers are invited to the promenade decks to watch as the solar panels are being unfolded. People go outside to goggle at the sight. The silver and black panels slowly emerge from their containment slots, and the Space Tanic finally takes its real form. As the sun's energy begins to flow into the ship, the thrust engines turn to minimum. The spaceship is now in energy collecting mode. For the trip to Mars to take just a few days, it needs to make a transit jump. In another 5 hours, another announcement rings across the board. The ship is approaching the moon, and the passengers are invited to look at the satellite from up close. The Space Tanic passes by at several thousand miles, and the moon looks huge. All the craters on the satellite, even the smallest ones, are clearly visible. The view is outstanding. The moon is left behind, and lights on the ship go dim. There's no natural change of day and night in space, so the crew monitors the time and imitates the shift. The next day promises nothing of interest, as there's going to be a long traverse between the moon and Mars. The passengers are wandering off to their cabins to sleep. The next 2 days go uneventful. On the decks, there are numerous types of entertainment for guests. From gyms and swimming pools to game rooms and dancing halls. People wander around the promenade decks, enjoying the serene views of space. Nothing bodes trouble. On the 4th day, the captain finally announces that the Space Tanic is preparing for the transit jump in 30 minutes. When the time comes, the passengers only feel a slight tug as the huge vessel leaps through space-time, entering the vicinity of Mars. Many passengers go outside to look at the red planet, which is already visible in the dark abyss. The tour is entering its final stage, but the landing is only planned for late night. At 11 p.m., when most passengers were already in their beds, the Space Tanic begins the final maneuvers. It has to make a little roundabout trip over Mars because the port is on the other side of the planet. The flight is nearing its end, only a couple of hours left before landing. The ship is in the orbit on the far side of Mars. Everything's quiet. Too quiet. All of a sudden, an enormous boom thrashes the whole Space Tanic, throwing sleeping people out of their beds. Blinking emergency lights turn on. Everyone's confused, but no announcement comes from the captain. And only those who have been on the starboard side promenade deck notice the horrible detail. The right front wing has been torn off and is zooming past them towards the stern. Pressing their faces to the glass, straining to look at the hull, they see a huge gash near the nose of the ship. The Space Tanic shudders again, and chunks of metal fly out of the gaping hole. The ship rapidly loses pressurization. Meanwhile, the broken-off wing hit the stern and left another gash in it. Mechanisms in the engine compartment start to fall apart and are dragged into space. The ship groans and comes to a halt, suspended thousands of miles above Mars. At last, the captain announces through the intercom that the Space Tanic has unexpectedly collided with a rogue asteroid. All passengers are asked to proceed to their respective decks for evacuation. Within an hour, all rescue capsules are occupied and ready to be deployed. But about a third of the passengers are still on board the ship. It turns out many of the capsules were blown away at the collision. History seems to repeat itself. The captain still orders to deploy the capsules, and they whoosh out of containment tanks, leaving hundreds of people behind. Some left without their family members, not knowing what fate awaits them. The capsules float in space for a few seconds and then turn on their thrust engines, heading to the Martian surface. Another order from the captain. Everyone is to go down to their cabins and put on pressurized suits stored under their beds. As the passengers rush to comply, the Space Tanic sends distress signals to Mars and everyone in the vicinity. 100,000 miles away, a large trade ship, Leona, picks up the signal and hurries to help. The creaks and groans on board the Space Tanic become more and more frantic. People are sitting silently in their cabins. It's quiet on board, except for the sounds of the slowly disintegrating ship. And then, suddenly, a loud snap resonates throughout the Space Tanic, and the vessel cracks in two. A gigantic fracture goes from top to bottom, almost perfectly halfway across the decks. Pressurized glass covering the promenade decks shatter into millions of pieces, slowly flying away from the ship. With the decks depressurized, people and things are blown away into outer space. Thankfully, all of the passengers and crew are wearing their suits as ordered, but they only have about an hour before they run out of oxygen. People help each other by floating together and hauling stranded ones to their groups. They can barely control their floating, but somehow they still manage to bring some order to the chaos. Huddled together in orbit above the ominously red planet, they watch as the mighty Space Tanic turns into a heaping pile of space debris. 45 minutes have passed. The oxygen is running low, and people try to breathe as slowly and carefully as they can. There's still no help in sight, and they're preparing for the worst. But then, one of them starts waving and pointing somewhere. It's a bright spot, hardly different from the stars in far space, but it's getting closer by the second. And within 5 minutes, the relieved people see a spaceship speeding towards them. The Leonas arrive just in time to save the day. Quickly, but without hurry, Leona's crew gather everyone floating in space around the remains of the Space Tanic and haul them on board their ship. In a few hours, the Leona safely lands at Mars' main spaceport. The newspapers called it the day when the Titanic sank again. The megalodon was the biggest shark to ever live. Not only that, it's one of the biggest fish and the largest predator in Earth's history. They've been known to reach lengths of up to a whopping 70 feet. That's over 3 times longer than the biggest great white shark on record. The females have also been found to be around twice the size of the males. The megalodon could swallow a small car without it even touching its teeth, if cars had been around then. Its teeth could grow to over 7 inches long. It looks like we're going to need a bigger boat, and best make it steel-plated, as this shark can easily gnaw its way through ships. The underwater terror could bite a ship clean in half, with the highest bite force ever calculated for any animal, living or extinct. The force of its ferocious bite was up to 40,000 pounds. That's around 108,000 times the strength of a human's and 10 times the force of a modern crocodile's bite. Its chomp is so strong that it makes the T-Rex's bite look about as powerful as my granny's after she's taken her dentures out. In fact, the Meg was so big and powerful that it had no natural predators. It was the uncrowned king of the seas, swimming freely from ocean to ocean. This cosmopolitan creature was found all over the world, from America to Europe and Australia to Japan, assuming there were countries back then. Meg fossils have been found on every continent except Antarctica. Everybody skips Antarctica. Science tells us that the megalodon went extinct over 3.6 million years ago. But could they still be alive at the deepest depths of the ocean? Only around 80% of the ocean has been explored, and its deepest point, the Bermuda Trench, is over 7 miles down. So who knows what's lurking at the bottom? If you did manage to make it down, it is unlikely that you'll run into a Meg, though. The sharks, like us, preferred warmer coastal waters. Deep ocean living would be too cold for the beasts, and food would be scarce. Their entire bodies would also have to evolve to avoid being squished by the enormous water pressure down there. It's unlikely they're still around, but not impossible. Some good news, if you do run into one, is that the shark is pretty unlikely to eat you. You are way too small a meal for the megalodon, even if you have a couple of friends with you. This guy eats whales that are over 50 feet long. If you're having a beach party, though, it's a different story. In a beach full of swimmers, the shark very well might creep up, scooping several humans into its giant mouth without even chewing. But wait, let's rewind. How does the shark take down a 50-foot whale? It first bites off its fins, making the whale unable to swim away. It then casually munches it down piece by piece. Because of their size, sharks had to consume over a ton of food every single day just to sustain themselves, like me. All that food made the megalodon extremely heavy. They range from anywhere between 50 to over 100 tons. For context, that's around the same as 7 to 16 adult male African elephants. To fit all this food in, their jaws had to open pretty wide. A megalodon's jaw could span 9 by 11 feet wide. That's easily big enough to swallow 2 adult humans side by side. The fearsome name megalodon comes from 2 Greek words, mega meaning big and odont meaning tooth. So combined, they mean what? Big tooth. And it certainly lives up to its name. Just one of its chompers is the same size as a human head. It had 276 humongous teeth in total across 5 terrifying rows. In all of history, only a couple of saber-toothed cats and the T-Rex had consistently bigger teeth. Now that's a showdown I'd like to watch. The megalodon vanished millions of years ago, leaving only huge teeth to be found by modern archaeologists. They literally disappeared with very few traces left. Scientists believe that over time, sea levels dropped and the ocean temperatures went down rapidly. Over a third of all marine life was wiped out as the oceans cooled, and a number of animals at the bottom of the food chain plummeted. This had a catastrophic effect on the hungry predators at the top. Sorry guys. It became way too cold for these sun-loving sharks too, which made it difficult for them to reproduce since they gave birth in warm waters. The megalodon is usually described as a sort of giant great white shark, but this is just a common myth. In fact, the ancestors of today's great white existed at the same time as the meg. But they weren't best buddies, and were even in competition with each other. The great white shark was a better hunter, using its smaller size and agility to snap up the meg's prey quickly. They were also known to eat meg pups, who were only half their size. This didn't help the whole extinction thing. Even infant megalodons were huge, coming in at just under 7 feet. While a great white was no match for an adult meg in a head-to-head fight, they sure weren't scared of stealing their food. This only left the bigger fish and whales for the meg, but its food supplies began to run out as the whales swam to the cooler new seas. The whales adapted to prefer the colder temperatures, leaving our friend the meg behind. The megalodons either starved or were frozen into extinction by the Ice Age. Rather than a great white, the megalodon is more like a modern bull shark. It had a short snout, flat lower jaw, and huge pectoral fins to support its massive weight and size. As scary as they are, these sharks were actually caring family guys. Several megalodon nursery areas have been discovered in Florida, Maryland, and Panama. They gave birth to their young in shallow water environments. We know this from discovering loads of tiny megalodon teeth found in these areas. Gee, I wonder if they had nannies too. But how come there are so many megalodon teeth out there for us to analyze? Well, due to their messy, aggressive eating habits, sharks regularly lose their teeth. They lose a set of teeth every 1 to 2 weeks. That's 40,000 teeth in a lifetime. They must rake in a fortune from the tooth fairy. Because of this, their teeth were continuously raining down to the ocean floor. Luckily for us, they're also the hardest part of a shark skeleton, which is why so many teeth have survived and become fossilized. It's fair to say that the first discoveries of the meg's teeth confused people. Early discoverers thought the meg's teeth were petrified tongues of ancient serpent creatures. They even used to call them tongue stones. It's also a common myth that the megalodon was around at the same time as the dinosaurs, although this would have been pretty cool. The dinosaurs were wiped out around 66 million years ago, but the megalodons came much later. The oldest meg fossil is only around 23 million years old, but it's tricky to pinpoint the exact date. After all, calendars weren't invented yet. They became extinct way before humans even evolved. The earliest Homo sapiens, which is a fancy name for the first humans, emerged about 2.5 million years ago. But what if the megalodon shark didn't go extinct? Whale populations have dropped drastically since these guys were last around, so there'd be way fewer whales for them to chomp down on. Whales have also gotten a lot smarter and learned new defensive moves, making them way harder to take down. It's estimated that they ate around 12 tons of food each day. If they were still around and eating that much, they'd be forced to eat smaller fish, and there'd be barely enough big fish for us humans to survive on. The naughty megalodons would also be able to track fishing boats and steal the fish that they worked hard to collect. It's safe to say we'd see a lot less fish in the aisles of your neighborhood supermarket. As our ocean temperatures are heating up again, the sharks would also thrive and reproduce faster than ever. There'd be more and more of these giant eating machines in the water, reducing our fish supply even more. It would also cause massive problems for cargo ships and cruising vessels. Imagine coming into contact with one of these bad boys while you're sunbathing on the deck. Even beachgoers would be hard hit. Megalodons give birth in shallow waters, so many of our favorite beaches would quickly become dangerous shark nursing grounds. Hey, where did that beach volleyball game go? They were playing just a moment ago.
The sea, this unrelenting water beast, has been defying all attempts to tame it for centuries. Many ships driven by the wind have gone through the harshest parts of the world. Some have survived the struggle with the sea, and many have come off second best. It's the year 1834. A ship called the Pilgrim is setting a course to sail from California to Boston. The journey will venture around South America and then past Cape Horn of Chile. Richard signs up as a merchant seaman aboard the Pilgrim. This is his first voyage at sea. The crew tells Richard stories of the Drake Passage off Cape Horn, a route that's legendary for its dangers. Countless ships and sailors have disappeared in those waters. Since Cape Horn's discovery in 1526, it's quickly become known to all those that have sailed around it as the ultimate test of any mariner's skill and of any ship's strength. Those that have survived the journey call Cape Horn a sailor's nightmare. Jack the helmsman, a salty veteran, steers the ship towards this most dangerous of all routes. Jack has been aboard the Pilgrim since it was first commissioned in 1825. He's passed by the Horn many times, each time learning a different lesson from the tests provided by the sea. The Pilgrim has been refitted since its past voyage a year ago. Richard values Jack's experience, given that it's his first journey at sea. Jack assures Richard of his confidence in the Pilgrim, even though it's just a small wooden brig with 2 masts. Jack's aware that wooden vessels are gradually becoming outdated, replaced by new steam-powered ships. But Jack prefers the maneuverability of the Pilgrim and would take it over the steel ships any day. Richard is excited to be aboard. There's so much to explore in life as a merchant seaman, but the guy struggles to acquire his sea legs on the boat. Forceful winds make the Pilgrim move faster, providing Richard with a quick introduction to life at sea. At the same time, nothing can prepare him for what is to be experienced at Cape Horn. It's the southernmost point of land before Antarctica. The gap between the icy continent and Cape Horn holds the infamous Drake Passage, approximately 700 miles between Cape Horn and the Antarctic Peninsula. Strong winds provide an uninterrupted, steadfast journey toward the Horn. But, as Jack tells Richard, the winds are more concentrated at the Drake Passage. They create a funneling effect, becoming stronger and more unpredictable. Richard is unsure of what this might mean for the Pilgrim, but understands that there's no easier route to travel around South America. A few days pass. The Pilgrim sails by the many islands that make up the western coast of Chile. Although the sea has been relatively calm, Richard continues to deal with his lack of sea legs. His movements are still not very graceful. The constant, ever-swaying deck rises and falls, and Richard finds it hard to get used to the motion. Random large waves hit the Pilgrim from every angle. The ship is quickly approaching Cape Horn. Richard looks towards great thunderous black clouds in the distance. "Welcome to the Horn," Jack says, half laughing. A wry smile upon his face soon disappears. The man gets serious, knowing what awaits them all. Stronger winds start blowing the sails as the crew scrambles to hang onto the ropes. Richard desperately sets to adjust the aft sails, adjusting for the constant change in strong southerly winds. Jack holds firm at the helm, knowing the importance of his role. He's wary of the swell. It can build very quickly the further south they travel. It's crucial the Pilgrim doesn't venture too close to the Horn when they approach. The great darkness that was in the distance is now all around them, filling the sky in every direction. Blackened clouds throw rain and hail down at the crew as they try to resist the enraged weather. Jack is directed by the captain at the helm, changing the direction of the vessel. The temperature has dropped significantly. Barely keeping the water from his eyes, he turns toward the port side bow to provide his face a brief break from the torment of the wind. Looking out into the distance, the man sees the Horn standing alone, surrounded by mist. It's a haunting sight. He steers the Pilgrim along the face of the Horn, the distance getting shorter. The waves shrink in height since the depths become shallower. But these waves are much steeper, and their angle can cause more damage to the wooden vessel. Jack's unsure how much of these waves the Pilgrim can take before the hull is breached. Richard, still posted at the aft sails, watches the water and icebergs floating by. He's unsure how large they actually are, since they're mostly hidden underwater. But he knows to alert Jack if any get too close. Just one iceberg hitting the Pilgrim will be all that the hull can withstand. Dutifully, he watches over the side and into the distance. Icebergs aren't the only thing to look out for. Rogue waves are common in these seas as well. The connecting Antarctic and Pacific Oceans, mixed with stormy weather, form waves together. This creates much larger rogue waves. Such waves have been known to reach up to 100 feet tall. They can destroy most vessels in their path. It'll surely be the end of the Pilgrim if it comes across a rogue wave. Strong currents adjust the route of the Pilgrim, as though the Horn is trying to lure the ship toward its rocky shallows. Slowly, they are getting pulled closer toward the Horn. Jack is fighting the current at the helm. Spinning the wheel, he strains his body as much as he can. Grunting, he plunges the wheel from the port side to starboard and back again. The captain keeps yelling directions. To a novice, they're extremely confusing. But Jack, a hardened veteran, continues to interpret the directions with ease, steering to readjust their course away from the Horn. The captain orders Richard to assess the hull below the decks. With the level of pounding the Drake Passage has provided so far, it's surely harmed the ship in some way. Richard runs to the deck as another sailor yells something at him, but the noise of the sea makes it difficult to hear. A wave hits the side, flowing onto the deck. Richard manages to hang on to the mast before he's almost swept overboard. The entire front deck seems to be underwater. Hanging on as the water rolls off the sides of the ship and waiting for it to clear, Richard watches the Horn slowly go past. Still, it beckons toward the Pilgrim, as though asking for its dues from the crew. The currents are still pulling the ship, while the storm is raging on, with no end of the struggle in sight. The storm is growing ever larger and fiercer. Richard gathers himself to head below and assess the damage. After a slow descent to the lower decks, Richard can finally look over the hull from the ship's quarters. There's no damage from what he can gather. But he's shocked by the depth of the water inside. It's now at waist depth. Cups, amongst other things, float in the water. Even inside the ship, the guy can't escape the waves. Unable to make sense of it all, he stands frozen, listening to the almighty power of Mother Nature outside. The sea roars even more wildly, waves constantly thudding against the hull. It sounds like a somber drumbeat, a slow countdown to the demise of the Pilgrim. Richard forces himself back to the terrors of the above decks, grasping onto the rails to carefully walk the slippery stairs. He leaves the disturbing creaks of the wooden decks. They're soon replaced with the strained sounds of the ropes, the yells of other sailors, and the deafening roar of the sea crashing all around him. Jack is at the helm, focused on his role, still fighting the wind and the waves, even with the addition of ice and frost. It seems that the world around him has set its heart to distract the man from his duty, but Jack pushes on determinedly. For 9 days, the Pilgrim fights the constant changes in stormy weather, facing all kinds of obstacles, but the ship manages to make it through. As they leave the storm behind, the crew sets their course north for their final destination. The sight of the sun peeking through the dark clouds is the most relieving thing Richard has ever experienced. Unfortunately, Richard lost his rations at some stage during the storm. At sea, if your rations are lost, it's your own bad luck. Luckily, Jack is kind enough to share some of his.
Giant container ships are responsible for much of the global trade. Thanks to them, you receive your orders from overseas, sooner or later. But they do have a problem just like any mechanical vessel. They tend to break down. That's where these little bad boys come in. Tugboats are meant to help any stranded vessel that either lost power or sustained any technical or physical damage. Besides being salvage vessels, tugboats also help guide ships when they dock. Since these ships are massive, underline, they require little tugboats to survey the surroundings and help them navigate to dock properly. They also serve as firefighting boats in case a fire breaks loose in the ship. Many of these cargo ships already have a system to stop fires, but tugboats provide extra help in case the fire gets out of control. Many cargo ships pass through below-zero regions like the Arctic and face plenty of obstacles, or icicles. Tugboats to the rescue again. They can make the first move by breaking the ice so that the vehicle can pass through without damaging itself or delaying its course. They also help large ships move through narrow areas. On March 23, 2021, the Ever Given, one of the largest container ships in the world, got stuck in the Suez Canal for 6 days. It froze global shipping of almost $10 billion of trade in a day. The Suez Canal is one of the most important routes for trading, but happens to be quite narrow for its purpose. To put that into perspective, it's like the Empire State Building getting lodged in the middle of a busy freeway. So, if you were wondering why your delivery was late during that month, it's probably because of that incident. The bottom of the ship nearly touched the floor of the canal. In the early morning of March 23rd, the weather was acting up. It was getting worse and worse, with the wind picking up to around 45 miles per hour. Those were some terrible weather conditions for navigation. That should have been the first red flag, but the Canal Authority didn't have a system for monitoring weather conditions or warning ships about them. The captain, Krishnan Kantavel, ignored the signs and decided just to go with it, not knowing the perils and the consequences ahead. The Egyptian pilots that were assisting with the navigation failed to provide proper instructions. As a result, the ship became jammed diagonally, essentially blocking the whole canal. The canal authorities didn't provide tugboats for some reason, which is why it was stuck for 6 days. Things were so bad, they had to bring excavation diggers to remove some land for the ship to properly turn back to normal. So, these little tuggers are really important for world trading to work. The vessels are getting bigger and bigger, with the world depending on import and export more than ever. They're built for going long distances rather than maneuvering in tight spaces and corners. The tugboats are surrounded by a material that won't scratch or damage the vessel, kind of like bumper cars at the carnival. They can either push or pull. But one thing's for sure, more than one is needed to help a ship get back on its aquatic feet. Ships don't have a lot of water passing over the rudder for them to turn quickly, and they risk damaging the engine if they push it too hard. They can either tow it directly or indirectly. The tug is pulling the vessel either in front of it or from side to side. They can also push it from one side to another. These tiny boats are like ants compared to giant ships. Their success secret is that they're floating on the water, which means there's no solid foundation for them to struggle. As a result, pushing and pulling is easy. Many newer tugboats have 2 large diesel-powered engines. There are also some electric models which are good for the environment and still do their job well. Shipping boats in general are better for the environment than trucks and planes, but are slower. Shipping vessels mainly carry food, clothing, electronics, furniture, and my stuff. The biggest ship can carry the Eiffel Tower on its back like it's no big deal, although getting it over to the ship would be. They're 1,000 times more powerful than a regular car. If all the containers in the world were arranged in a pile, it would cover half the planet. If you ever walked on a beach in the 90s and saw what appeared to be a rubber ducky, you were dreaming. In 1992, a shipping crate holding 28,000 rubber ducks was lost at sea while journeying from Hong Kong to the U.S. They say it fell off the ship and has been around the world's oceans for more than 20 years. What seemed like a horrible accident that would leave dire consequences for the world's marine ecosystem proved to also be helpful for us to learn and understand the world of plastic pollution and how the ocean currents work. These ducks seem to have had quite the journey when they broke free from their container life. Some reports show they got washed up on the shores of Alaska, South America, Hawaii, Pacific Northwest, Scotland, Australia, and even froze in the Arctic. Rather than making their way to thousands of bathrooms in the U.S., they went rogue and backpacked around the world to see what else lies beyond tiled walls and bubble baths. Many were collected and removed from the seas and oceans, while some are still out there. There are around 2,000 of these duckies circulating in the currents of the North Pacific Gyre. In case you were wondering, that's a place where the currents meet and whirl with one another between Japan, Alaska, Kodiak, and the Aleutian Islands. They've even created a website to track these ducks down with a contact form that lets people inform of one or many ducks they find across the world. But who knows? Maybe we'll never recover every single duck that was lost at sea at the time. This is just one incident out of many. Studies show that at least 2,000 to 10,000 shipping containers are lost at sea every year. Many containers that do slip off and fall into the sea don't always sink to the bottom. They're floaters. On the downside, they don't float high enough to become colorful islands that are easy to notice. They float like icebergs, with just the top of the container showing, which means that any passing ship or boat won't see it from above. If they pass through it, then significant damage can happen to the ship. They can't stay floating forever, so they end up sinking after many days of being suspended in the open water. Some people have even seen shipping containers washed up on shore after being stranded at sea. These bad boys have been made to last for a very long time. If you take proper care of them, the life expectancy of each container can stretch for more than 20 years. It's pretty amazing that they travel all over the world and are filled and refilled with new items many times. They go through all sorts of weather conditions and have to survive in different climates. Many modern houses are made out of retired shipping containers designed with a nice aesthetic touch. Shipping container houses provide the exact same living conditions, except they look cool. Besides looking cool, they're economically friendly compared to regular houses. You can save plenty of money with the structure pretty much halfway done. All that's needed is just a little foundation and a few adjustments here and there, and boom, you've got yourself a house. You're also doing the world a favor by contributing to the environment. Those homes are recycled containers that have just been refurbished and polished for anyone to live in. They're good enough to live in freezing conditions and scorching weather. The industry is booming, so you can have your new home delivered to you within 10 weeks. You can customize it before they build it for you. It's easy to transport since it's not heavy, it's just bulky. You can predict your cost without the surprise payments that might follow. Many of these containers start their journey in a steel yard and travel all over the world. And in the end, they retire in a nice piece of land and host families that will get to be a part of their history. Wow, I can hardly contain myself.
Picture this. You're an astronaut, hurtling through the cosmos in your state-of-the-art spaceship. But suddenly, you notice that you're running out of fuel. What are you going to do? Trapped in the middle of space. It's hardly like there's a floating gas station. The good news is that you're not going to get completely stuck. A spaceship will never actually stop after running out of fuel. All because there's basically no atmosphere in space. That's where the popular phrase, "in space, no one can hear you scream," comes from. Sound travels through the vibration of teeny tiny atoms and molecules. In space, where there is no air, there's simply no way for sound to travel. It's the same for our spaceship. Because there's no air, there's also a complete lack of air resistance. Those tiny particles that do exist in space are way too small to reduce the spacecraft's momentum or drag it back. Because of this, most spacecraft actually turn their engines off for the biggest part of their journey. So, don't believe those movies that show spaceships with their engines on all the time. That's completely inaccurate. Unlike vessels in the water, a ship in space doesn't need constant thrust to keep moving forward. Usually, its engine is only fired up for short periods of time. This is not only practical, but also saves money. Fuel is really expensive to transport into space as it's heavy. That's why space probes try to use as little fuel as possible. They need it when they set off from Earth, and then again when they re-enter the atmosphere. It happens when they need to slow down upon their return. While cars and trains have brakes, it's not that simple to bring a spaceship to a screeching halt. The engines are needed to slow the ship down or bring it to a complete stop. This involves strategically firing up impressive thrusters at the front. It creates the needed drag and reduces the spaceship's speed. But this process also requires super high levels of precision. One wrong move and you're toast. Literally. Hit the thrusters too fast and the spacecraft will set on fire as you re-enter Earth's atmosphere at thousands of miles per hour. Traveling too slowly can also cause problems, because in this case, you might miss our planet's orbit completely and move way past Earth. And most spacecraft don't have enough fuel to try for a second re-entry, so traveling too slowly needs to be avoided at all costs. But back to the issue at hand. This basically means that any vehicle with an empty tank will continue traveling at the same speed across space until it eventually runs into something. There's just no other way for it to stop. Wait, actually, maybe that's not good news. If you get stranded, it's pretty unlikely that your buddies over there at NASA are going to organize a rescue mission. This sounds kinda sad, but it does make sense. By the time they set up a new team and find a ship to come and rescue you, you'll have already traveled so far into space it would take them years to reach you. This would also cost a ridiculous amount of money. NASA spends on average a whopping $152 million to launch a ship into space. That's as much as buying 6 brand new top-of-the-range Lamborghinis. Even crazier, it cost NASA about $49 billion to develop and launch the first space shuttle. Unfortunately, once you've left Earth's orbit, it's near impossible that you'll make it back without fuel. That's what actually happened to NASA's Dawn spacecraft back in 2018. On a random day, the spaceship ran out of fuel. This left it completely stranded in the middle of space. It stopped transmitting signals to Earth, bringing an end to an 11-year-long mission that set loads of space records. The spacecraft could no longer generate electricity, as it had no fuel to move its solar panels to point them toward the sun. And to this day, the spaceship is still floating somewhere in space in a derelict state. Luckily, Dawn had no astronauts on board. The spacecraft began to orbit the dwarf planet Ceres, which was the object it was originally investigating. For context, an orbit is a curved path around a star, planet, or moon that an object gets stuck in. But wait, NASA are experts in all things relating to spacecraft, so how did they allow a ship to run out of fuel in the first place? It's actually super difficult to accurately measure the amount of fuel you'll need in space. On Earth, gravity keeps all the fuel at the bottom of the tank, and you can use a float sensor to measure how full the tank is. But this is impossible in space due to a lack of gravity that normally weighs the fuel down. Instead, a common approach is to add an air bladder into the fuel tank that's pressurized before launch to push the fuel into lines. The more fuel is used, the more this bladder expands. It takes up more space and keeps the fuel under the right amount of pressure. This pressure is monitored. That's how they can tell how much fuel is left. As you see, it's a lot more complicated than here on Earth. But say there were astronauts aboard a spacecraft that had run out of fuel. How long could they survive? Well, this depends on how much food and water is on board. NASA usually calculates the extra amount of food astronauts need for their trip to avoid adding extra weight to the spacecraft. But the good news is that this food can technically be rationed, and its consumption can be spread out. That's because astronaut food comes in special packaging to stop it from going bad. There are no refrigerators aboard spacecraft. The food comes in clear, flexible pouches that can be snipped open with scissors. All the food is pre-cooked and processed, so it doesn't need to be stored in a fridge. The only exceptions are fresh fruit and vegetables. These are the only things that need to be eaten quickly, as they will spoil. Today, astronauts also work with nutritionists so they can pick out the foods that they like and will enjoy eating. They can choose from a whole bunch of products, including mushroom soup, macaroni and cheese, chicken, beef, ham, nuts, and even yummy cookies. Shrimp cocktail is apparently a new favorite among astronauts because of how spicy it tastes. Flavored drinks also come in powdered form, just like the Kool-Aid or instant coffee packets you have sitting in your kitchen cupboard. Interestingly, astronauts often report not feeling hungry in space, so it may be easier than you'd think to ration the food. But even if you can make your food last, what about water? Transporting anything into space costs a lot, and water is quite heavy, so it costs even more to transport. For this reason, tanks of water can't be constantly shipped up to space. Instead, astronauts have a really complex water system. It squeezes every last drop of safe and available liquid out of the environment. This involves recycling used water. It means that our buddies in space drink water that's been filtered from old shower water, their breath, the spaceship's fuel cells, sweat, and so on. But don't worry, such water is safe to drink, and it's actually even better than most drinking water that comes out of taps in the US. The water on a spacecraft first goes through a bunch of filters, starting with one that removes particles and debris. Then it passes through multi-filtration beds, containing clever substances that remove impurities. The final stage gets rid of harmful compounds and destroys nasty bacteria and viruses. There are also water reserves in case of emergency. For example, the International Space Station keeps around 530 gallons of water in its reserves, just in case. But what about the air supply? The primary source of oxygen on spacecraft comes from something called water electrolysis. This is an amazing system that uses electricity from the craft's solar panels to split water into hydrogen and oxygen gas. But as we saw with NASA's Dawn, without electricity, it's pretty difficult to aim the solar panels at the sun, which means that the oxygen system would likely shut down. There is some oxygen stored in a pressurized storage tank, though. This is a backup supply designed for emergencies, so it's not all bad news.
So in 2017, over 25 million people boarded cruise ships all over the world. Now, if you're keeping count, that's more than the total population of Greece. It's become America's favorite choice when it comes to going on vacation. It's easy to see why hopping aboard a cruise ship becomes more popular each year. Heading out on a cruise is also coming back in style with newer generations. 2/3 of Gen Y and millennials say that cruising is their new preferred type of vacation. How's that? Well, let's see. It's easy to plan in advance. On board, you can find activities for all family members, and you get a chance to visit several different destinations in one trip. An added bonus of booking a cruise? You can sample various places for a future time off. The entertainment on board is often top-notch, providing passengers with an added taste of luxury. And the amenities and accommodations are generally very reliable. Not to mention that it gives tourists that feeling of actually getting away from everything that people strive for while out of the office. Royal Caribbean International is one of the largest cruise lines in the world, with just over 19% of the cruise market as of 2018. Its current fleet is divided into many different classes of ships, including the Voyager class, Radiance, and Quantum. The latest addition to the Royal Caribbean International's impressive fleet was built in 2018. Wonder of the Seas is now the largest cruise ship in the world. Since this spectacular liner has just had her maiden voyage in March 2022, let's look at some of the incredible perks it has to offer its passengers. For starters, the boat is so big that it had to be split into neighborhoods. Well, it figures since Wonder of the Seas can accommodate almost 7,000 passengers. Fond of New York? Well, no worries. Wonder of the Seas has a central park of its own, with an estimated 10,000 plants to check out. The ship's central park is a feature of all Oasis-class ships, being one of the so-called neighborhoods. Let's look at some other areas, shall we? Like this boardwalk, a place that includes an arcade, a candy store, and a sports bar. It's best suited for long walks. There's a pool and sports zone on Wonder of the Sea. These areas feature the ship's numerous pools and hot tubs. There are many activities to check out on the sports court. Then there's the Royal Promenade, or Promenade if you prefer. That's the main road on Wonder of the Seas, with bars, lounges, and places to grab a cup of coffee, or a luxurious latte. The entertainment neighborhood is the focal point for leisure activities on the ship. Here, guests can find a comedy club, an ice skating rink, and even a theater. The spa and fitness area is a tranquil zone with a huge array of treatments available. The fitness center is free of charge, by the way, so there's no excuse for guests to skip a leg day. An extra 8th zone was added to Wonder of the Seas. It's called the Suite Neighborhood. This is an exclusive area designed for guests staying in the suites. Oh, now I get it. It's located at the top of the ship. Guests here have designated staff members called Royal Genies. Yeah, if you rub a lamp in your suite, they appear. Nah, not really. The genies are similar to butlers. They can cater to just a few cabins. Of course, the cruise line wants to divert other guests from asking these crew members various questions and taking their time. That's why the genies don't wear name tags in public areas. As for its itinerary, Wonder of the Seas was initially supposed to be homeported in China, but Royal Caribbean decided to move the liner to the United States. In March 2022, the ship started its journey with 7-night Eastern and Western Caribbean itineraries. In May 2022, Wonder of the Seas is scheduled for a trip to Europe, with Western Mediterranean cruises from Barcelona and Rome planned for its guests. Passengers will also be able to visit Palma de Mallorca, Spain, and Capri, Italy. When the summer season is over, Wonder of the Seas is scheduled to return to Florida to offer year-round sailing starting November 2022. And by the way, there is no truth to the rumor that a special cruise only for highly allergic and hay fever sufferers will be called the Wonder of the Sneeze. Nope, not at all. Now, it's hard to imagine a ship so massive that can accommodate so many amenities on board. For example, the Titanic was the largest ship of its time, measuring 882 feet in length. And Wonder of the Seas is not only 1,188 feet long, it's also 36% taller and 34% wider. Speaking of lifeboats, which I am about to, Titanic had a mere 20 lifeboats on board, which was tragically not enough to fit all the passengers after the ship hit the iceberg. But Wonder of the Seas has an even smaller number of lifeboats, 18 to be precise. Sounds weird and dangerous? Well, not really, given that each of these lifeboats can accommodate up to 370 people. It means that all the passengers and crew members, an estimated 8,000 people if fully booked, are going to be safe in case of an emergency. If we could somehow have a race between the two ships, well, Titanic was in fact the faster ship out of the two, beating Wonder of the Seas by 1 knot per hour. Cruise ship passengers today are more interested in the experience rather than the speed of the boat itself. That's why how fast a ship can travel is not an extremely important aspect nowadays. In terms of costs, Titanic cost around $7.5 million at the time of its construction. It's the equivalent of about $200 million today. How about Wonder of the Seas? Well, it cost a staggering $1.35 billion to build, making it 6 times more expensive than the Titanic. How about we compare ticket prices? Well, in this case, the least expensive ticket on Titanic was £7. It's about $1,000 today. The cheapest ticket on Wonder of the Seas is currently $423, but prices may vary depending on the location, season, itinerary, and how much you tip your Royal Genie. And I know you were going to ask, how about icebergs? Well, Titanic steamed in the frigid North Atlantic, where you had to be on the lookout for those. Wonder of the Seas will be cruising the balmy Caribbean, where the worst thing you can hit on is 17 and blackjack. Oops, busted. Anyway, set side by side with its other sisters from the Royal Caribbean fleet, Wonder of the Seas is equally as impressive. The company's earliest ships could host about 2,500 people. This included passengers and the staff. Such ships were Splendor of the Seas, Legend of the Seas, and the smallest of them all, Thumbelina of the Seas. No, wait, that should be Empress of the Seas. Oops, my bad. The largest ships in the company's fleet can now house about 9,000 people altogether. That's almost 3 times the size and capacity of the earlier liners. Wonder of the Seas is one of them, as well as Harmony of the Seas and Symphony of the Seas. Are you seeing a pattern here? Yep, if you ever encounter a ship with "of the seas" in its name, it's safe to assume it belongs to Royal Caribbean. But if it's a can of tuna, it might actually be Chicken of the Sea. Hey, I like tuna. Now, choosing between cruise ships based on their size is like wondering if you should visit your local museum or the Louvre in Paris. It all depends on your preferences. Some families prefer small settings. Others are fan of large spaces that can provide everything they need. Historically, it's equally as exciting how far we've come in terms of maritime transportation. The SS Royal William, for example, was the first boat to ever make a transatlantic voyage almost entirely steam-powered in 1833. And it was a mere 160 feet long and could house roughly 155 passengers. And if the seas were calm, then they were housed less roughly. Similarly, the first modern megaship in the world was the MS Sovereign of the Seas. Launched in 1987, it was only 888 feet long and could carry a little under 3,000 passengers. Size and capacity are not the single improvements added to newer cruise ships out there. Recent technological developments in artificial intelligence and facial recognition have allowed cruise operators to ensure faster, smoother boarding for passengers. If, in the past, it took from 60 to 90 minutes for all passengers to board a ship, nowadays, cruise ship operators manage to get people comfortably settled in less than 15 minutes. Now, I'm sure you're already eager to book a ticket, but let's look into some of the more interesting activities you can try on board Wonder of the Seas. This way, you'll know what you're getting yourself into. All Royal Caribbean ships have loads of artworks available for their guests to enjoy. But Wonder of the Seas goes above and beyond, even featuring statues of astronauts in key locations around the ship. You'll find the first astronaut looking through the glass at the promenade, while a second one is busy rock climbing at the boardwalk. The third and last astronaut is more of a movie fan. This statue can be found near the movie screen sitting area. Going astronaut sightseeing is proving to be quite the experience among guests. In the areas with no access to sunlight, Wonder of the Seas features virtual balconies. In case of bad weather, guests can still have a feeling of the outdoors, but without having to hide from wind or rain. Teenagers have a place of their own reserved on the ship. There's a special club with a private hot tub, selfie area, games, and comfortable seating. The inside part of this club features a vending machine, an interesting collection of literature, and tables for foosball. Well, sign me up.